Well, and good evening, everyone. Brad, thank you so much for that raid. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have another camera feed up top. What is going on with that? Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to Mike. Mike is going to be showing me which buttons to push and when this evening. Mike? Excellent. Let me figure out. Okay, so I don't have audio. Hold on 1 second here. You all couldn't hear Mike, could you? Stand by. What did I do last time for this? Okay, Mike. We're trying to figure out Zoom and the stream. Hornet, it's good to see you. Let's do this here. Computer audio. How about now? Airman Roman, hello. Can you guys, Mike, go ahead and say something. No, I don't see any speaker sound. One sec, guys. Stand by. Try again, Mike.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
I've got you still, Jason.
Cool. Can you guys hear Mike?
Hello, hello. Test, test.
Excellent. Cool. Any
Cool.
echo? Well, while troubleshooting audio on Twitch is kind of funky. So before we get started, Mike, you've got a captive audience. Go ahead and give us a quick spiel about
Yeah,
what you got going on.
I guess just little bit about myself. Yeah, I am an A320 FO in the United States here. I've been done a bunch of different things in the civilian side of aviation. But yeah, I've been at the current carrier that I'm at for about three and a half years or so. Been on the Airbus the whole time with them, and yeah, I've got a small channel that I had started on YouTube a couple of years ago, just where I started to do some technical talks, and there's just a whole bunch of interests that I have in aviation, and I wanted to share with people. So I got a real slow start, and it's just been a real small side hobby kind of project for me, but I've had a blast doing it, and yeah, I was flattered when Jason reached out to me, and we're getting a chance now to sit down and make some content here and do a little stream tonight. So that is my story.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I had discovered Mike on YouTube. He has a really fun series about what do all the buttons do in the cockpit. A lot of you watch me and ask, what do all the buttons do? And I figured that we could talk through. Mike has a copy of our OFP. We're going Seattle to Missoula this evening, and hopefully we'll have enough time for a second flight. And it should be a lot of fun. So I very much appreciate, Brad, the raid. I hope you had an amazing stream, sir. I appreciate the raid as always. I apologize that I have not been amazing with my attendance on your streams lately. But if you have questions tonight, ladies and gentlemen, about the Airbus, I can't answer them. Mike's going to help me, and hopefully we'll have a good flight without any issues. Mike has had a lot of fun, I think, discovering the real world of flight simulation in terms of how big it is. Would you say, Mike, that you were familiar with VATSIM and all these other things before
You know,
tonight?
yeah, I'd certainly was aware of them. I've heard of them, and yeah, it's just it's mind-boggling, as you say, like how deep the rabbit hole goes. But yeah, I was a simmer early on in my life, and that was a big hobby for a number of years. And I was telling Jason before the stream started here that just like it's amazing where things have come, and you guys are so lucky out there that to have these realistic things are just I just can't believe the realism factor. So it's amazing.
Excellent. So we are in the TOLIS A321. You guys asked for the long boy last week. Why don't you fly the long boy more often? Message received. Long boy it is. A321 SEAMSO. Let's get started. So we have ground power to the aircraft. Battery one or battery two, Mike? Is it always battery one?
It doesn't matter really. Yeah, usually battery one, and it's just funny the way us pilot types work because we always want to do things like in a methodical order. So I think most of us are a little OCD. It's even with something like that where it doesn't matter, but I always turn the number one on first and
Okay.
number two for whatever that's worth. So
How often do you have ground power when you start up? Half the time, 80% of the time,
I'd
30% of
say
the
more.
time?
It's like 95 or gosh, 99% of the time. We take the aircraft over most of the time. The maintenance folks have brought it over from doing their RON overnight check, so they kind of bring it over freshly powered, or we're assuming it from another crew. And the interesting thing about most of the planes, the way they're working out there is they very actually rarely get a full power down. And that's one thing that kind of surprised me when I came to this air carrier here. I came from a previous place where we were flying. I started out in smaller aircraft. We stepped up, but a lot of times you'd end up at some small like overnight station, and the plane was just sitting there by itself, like on its own, like nobody was around it. So there, and we had these cases where you'd always come into a cold dark cockpit. But here where I'm at right now, and most of the, I'd say the way the world works with aircraft of this scale, let's say, is that there's always somebody on them doing something. They're always powered up. So for us, I guess to answer your question, it's like it's actually a very rare thing that you come into a completely cold and dark cockpit.
Okay. So we've got it started up. You can see that we've got some system checks and whatnot occurring. I do not have the screens on the FO side. It gives me a couple extra frames. Let's pretend that they're on for the purposes of what we're doing here. We know on the ground in Seattle, thanks to our handy dandy active sky, that our local altimeter is 3010. So we will dial that in. While we wait for the aircraft to power up, we'll do a quick scan of the overhead. Procedurally, it's lower left, you work your way up. Center, down below, you work your way up. What are some of the things that you're immediately looking for, Mike, when you're powering up?
Yeah, so when you do the initial flight deck setup, I mean, I'd be like starting. Well, actually, the way our manuals are written, and this is probably most of the Airbuses out there where they folks are operating. But you start at the top left on the overhead there, so you'll start up at the ADIRS panel there. You get the alignment going. You do the tests up there, and we'll flow down. And with most of the stuff on the overhead, or did you want me to talk like how detailed do you want me to go, Jason? Because
You
I
know,
don't want to
I,
spend too
I would
much time. And
sure. I would say we can kind of cursory glance over things simply because I think that most of us kind of know what the things do. In this case, IR 1, 3, and 2. So my question to you is, I read 1, 2, 3. Is that how you do it? You go left, right, middle, or do you go left to right here? Or does it not
yeah,
matter?
the way you said it is the way that we're trained to do it. So it's the number one, the number two on the far right there, and then number three in the middle will be the last one you should do.
Gotcha. And
So,
do you always wait for that on bat to come and go, or is that just kind of
yep, you're actually supposed to wait for that. It's just part of the airplane once again checking that hey, this thing is going to be able to draw power from the battery if you were in some sort of an emergency electrical configuration. So it is something that you really yeah, that's the way it's written in the manuals, that you need to wait and verify that essentially.
gotcha? One of the things, Mike, that you'll probably find that in the sim, while the TOLUS, which is what we're in, on Prepared 3D, there's an aircraft made by FS Labs. They also make an A320, a 319, and a 321. The depth of simulation provided by the FS Labs, I think we can all agree, is far greater than the TOLUS. However, the TOLUS is, in my opinion, the best we have for X-Plane. So some of these things you will find, Mike, don't work. So if
Okay,
normally you would click this and count to 5, or normally you would click this and count to 6 and wait for a tone, that might not happen.
sure,
Um, so what I'll try to do is I'll kind of gloss over maybe areas that I have questions, or if I see
sure,
questions from the chat, and then the other areas we'll just kind of skip over because I think the depth of that simulation is probably overkill for everyone.
sure.
But if you see something in the chat and you want to speak up, please let me know. And Force Master, thank you so much for those 10 bits. It's good to see you, dude. I hope you're still riding your bike and kicking butt. I do emergency exit arm. I go auto on the signs, and I rotate. On Tuesdays we do nav 1. On Thursdays we do nav 2. Have I missed anything down below on the initial start here?
On the left side again there, Jason, we'll always turn. It looks like everything is set. So you get the crew supply, the oxygen, that'll obviously come on, but also the ground control for the recorder will actually turn that on.
Okay.
There you go. So those are set up properly. And the other switches you done already correctly. And the one I was going to tell you about, the 1 and 2 thing, that's an interesting one that, you're alternating. And that's certainly the way it is in the real world. Just, I don't know if it's a carrier specific thing. They do certainly alternate, but at ours we'll always do, when the FO is, it's his leg flying, it'll be on the number 2 side. And when it's the captain's leg, it'll be on the number 1 side. So just one little tidbit that might be interesting.
Okay. That is interesting. So down below we have our screens, we have our IRS in alignment. You can see here we've got our primary flight display, we've got our navigation display. We don't have anything going here because the IRS is still in alignment. There's a 2D pop-up for our FMGC mic so you can kind of see what's going on. But also the way the TOLIS works is the data, I have to kind of manually feed it into the aircraft. We don't have an uplink with company. We're not that high tech. So if we look at our load sheet and real quick, Mike, let's talk about this.
Sure.
At a quick glance, would you say that SimBrief is pretty accurate for information that kind of matches real world? You had said the format might not look the same based on your carrier, but do you find, we've got wind information, we've got all sorts of stuff here. Does this match pretty well?
Yeah, this is a very good representation of what you see in the real world as far as, it looks like you got, just glancing at this right off the bat, I can tell you that, this looks pretty realistic to me.
Okay. Before you begin to fly the plane from X to Y or A to B, how much time do you typically spend poring over one of these? 20 minutes? Hour? 15 minutes?
Very good question. I'd say, at least like 5 or 10 minutes, like as part of your initial, like my little routine is like when I'm in the van, actually, like if we're coming off an overnight, I'll pull up the release in the van on the way to the airport. So you're kind of preloaded with like just your mindset about what, you're dealing with on that day's flight. Of course, that's if, you're starting your day, that's your first leg. Maybe if it's, in between flights, okay, well, you're just on a quick turn or something, maybe an hour on the ground, same kind of thing, about 5 or 10 minutes there or so. But yeah, that's a good question. And you get really good after a while of just kind of knowing what to expect. And certainly you just know in general, in a given day's flight, like, okay, a San Fran to LA is going to be a really easy flight on a nice sunny day. But if you're launching into the Midwest on a summer afternoon, you're going to be dealing with a whole lot more elements and things that, will be more important to glean off of the release there. So it's like, that might be a direct thing to consider also about how much time you're actually, spending just gleaning over all these important pieces of information that come off that OFP there. So yeah, I'd say, 5 or 10 minutes, I guess, to answer the question directly.
Okay. We have a zero fuel weight on our A321 of just a hair under 71 tons, 70.8. We're looking at carrying about 7.5 tons of fuel. I realize you're probably used to Freedom units, but in this case, we'll do some quick conversions on the fly. Do you typically, Seattle is typically more of a base versus Missoula, which I can't imagine anyone has a hub out of Missoula. Will you sometimes, when you're light, carry extra fuel to get you back?
I would say it's very rare that they're going to give you round trip gas. But one thing that you will actually see quite a bit is they'll do something called fuel tankering. And I don't know are you familiar with the term, Jason?
I've heard of the term, yes.
So all that it means is that, let's say you're in a station where the fuel just happens to be like significantly cheaper. They won't give you the full amount of gas to, like I said, do a whole round trip and get you back, but they'll offset a little bit. So they might give you an extra, let's say 3,000 or 5,000 pounds. And I'm just throwing that out there as an arbitrary number, but they're saying, hey, gas is really cheap here. And even the weight it takes you to fly it here and back is still cheaper than like you going to the outstation and paying the premium at, the mom and pop, fuel shop or whatever, where they don't have a good contract. So, yeah, occasionally you'll carry around extra gas, and I'd say, I don't know, it's certainly not more than maybe a quarter of the time, if that. But you do see it from time to time.
Gotcha. Guts of Funk. with the Twitch Prime. Thank you so much, the Funk. I appreciate it. You know, sir, you've got one of those a month, and you've chosen to spend it on me, and I very much appreciate that. Welcome aboard. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for stopping by. If you have any questions for Mike, please type in the chat and I will relay them or he'll see them. Again, my name is Jason. We're flying the Tolis A321 with Mike over to Missoula, and I appreciate you joining me this evening. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're 7.5. We've got a zero fuel weight center of gravity of 28.2. Does that look pretty standard, pretty normal?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. Let's put 7.3 tons in the hull. Mike and I already talked about kind of what we're looking at. Based on the winds, we're going to depart off a 3-4 right. We are going to do the Mountain 2 departure, which is a vectoring departure. Sorry, the Mountain 1 departure, pardon. I am not flying online right now, ladies and gentlemen, and the only reason I'm not flying online is I wanted to make sure that Mike and I could chat. Thank you, Zafunk. I appreciate it. And I didn't want to add the complexity of ATC. When we flew with Katie last Thursday, she was a great trooper, but I think it distracted from her and I actually talking through things. And I want to make sure Mike has a platform to talk with you guys and answer questions. So we've got that loaded here. Now, I kind of blitzed through this process, Mike. Let's circle back here. You do the init. You plug in your stuff.
Okay.
I then immediately went to the init B. Do you go
Okay.
init A to init B, or do you go somewhere else first?
So they teach us an acronym, like, when we get to the part in school where we're learning the box here, that it's diffs rip. So DIFSRIP. So it just really quickly, you go data first, then init, then the flight plan, then the secondary, and then the rad nav, then back to init B, and then I guess the perf page is the last one. And it's like, I know there's a lot of things, and on each and every one of those pages there's steps to accomplish, but I'm not sure why. And to be honest, there's nothing that says like you have to do it a certain way. And I've even been, I don't want to say guilty, but like I have gone, right from init A to init B, because sometimes there's important pieces of information that you might overlook them, you forget to put them in. It's kind of embarrassing when the other guy like catches your error. We're all so, perfectionists, and we don't like to be, called out that we forgot to put something in the field or whatever. So, like I said, I guess, I don't know if that directly answers your question. The book says, come back to the B section kind of at the tail end of your setup there, but it's a technique thing, I would say. And it's just like if you get comfortable or you get used to doing it some way, there's nothing wrong with doing it that way.
Right. Okay. Captain Tim, good evening. I appreciate you stopping by, dude. I hope you're doing well, and thanks very much. Greetings from Sacramento. So I have kind of skipped around. What are we looking for on the rad nav page, Mike?
Yeah, so really, you'll come to the rad nav page, and you can input particular things. Like if you wanted to hard tune a VOR, for example. So you probably know, like, right now the plane is in auto tune, and you can see that just by the smaller casing of the letters, let's say by the VOR1 and VOR2 sections there. If you wanted to tell the plane, hey, I want to lock in this VOR, and Seattle's a great example because the single engine departure procedure is predicated off the Seattle VOR. So you could just put in the scratch pad SEA, and you could or the frequency too is fine.
No, let's do do SEA and then do
Yep.
line select 1 left.
You got it. Yep.
Okay.
And you'll see, so it makes it big there. So now it's telling the plane, hey, I want you, until I tell you to do something different, stay on the Seattle VOR because I might want to use that. And in our case here, I know, like I was telling you before, we go off 1.6, the 1.6 is so, many times. I know just the single ended departure procedure off that runway, it's just to track out via the Seattle 161 radial. I want to say it's going north. I want to say it's like 3-4 some odd radial, but it's irrelevant. Just to answer the question though, like you might hard put that into the course line now to just really what you're doing is you're setting yourself up. What I'm describing here is like in the case if you lost an engine right after takeoff, you have some reference that's just ready to go for you through this rad nav page that you've like set yourself up to have some guidance. So when everything's kind of falling apart all around you, you're just like, it's one less thing to do in the heat of the moment, let's say.
Yes, Graham. Mike is a real world Airbus. So how about this? Airbus driver. What, you know, you have a T-shirt,
Yep.
professional bus driver.
Yeah.
Um, do Airbus pilots like to refer to themselves as bus drivers?
I think the majority of us that don't take ourselves too seriously, I always kind of got a chuckle out of it. I joke with people that yeah, I'm a professional bus driver, by
Okay.
day, and I take no offense. I think it's more funny. It's just kind of a, I think it's a silly thing, but yeah, no offense toward me.
Okay.
Anybody tells me I drive a bus for a living, I'm proud of it.
So Mike drives a bus. Sometimes it's a shorter bus, sometimes it's a bigger
Yep,
bus, but it's a bus.
yep.
Okay. All right.
I've made that joke before too. I
how,
appreciate that one.
how about on the fuel prediction page? Anything we should be super aware of here?
Um, nothing. I don't know. Nothing super out of the ordinary here. You're obviously just always taking this high level look at okay, after we've programmed as much data in and as accurate as the releases like that come off the presses, say 90 minutes before we actually take off. When you get into the plane, you start to plug in some of the real time information. You're always just kind of looking out over the high level fuel picture there. So hey, am I going to be predicted to arrive about where I want to arrive at the destination airport with such and such gas I'm expecting to have on? So it's really just kind of doing a squint check here, and maybe I don't know if you're wanting to. It looks like there might be a couple extra fields that I want to say are present on the real thing that I'm for some reason it looks a little bit thin here, but
Yeah.
um,
I think, Mike, this is where sometimes the depth of simulation, we might lose it a bit.
okay.
Um, for example, I've noticed that when you plan an alternate, if you don't also put a route, it doesn't calculate it.
Right.
IRL, obviously, I'm sure there's a company uplink that programs a lot of this stuff or feeds this data. But I've noticed on the tow list, just putting an alternate is not enough to calculate this.
Yep. That's a great observation, Jason. And that's actually one of the ones that tends to get overlooked. In the real world, that is a manual entry that you actually have to make, and we take it right off the OFP
Mm,
because the dispatcher's calculated some sort of fuel burn that theoretically it will take you to get from your destination airport to the alternate if you need to go there. So that's a great catch. You have to put it in, manually with the line select keys and the scratch pad.
okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's get some APU action going here. Um, anything that let's pretend that we've done all the necessary fire tests.
Okay.
Anything that we should be checking before we hit this master SW button?
No, I think, yeah, you're in good shape there.
Okay.
Not really else to consider, I guess.
So I have seen a video from a gentleman that said to wait till you see the flap open message before
Mhm.
you hit start. Is that correct?
We're taught to wait just a 3-second count. We don't actually wait to visually look at the flap open message, and to be honest, I don't think there's any really operational reason why that's absolutely necessary. Um, I want to say it takes more than 3 seconds for that message to populate specifically, but it shouldn't hinder the the proper starting or whatever the
Okay.
APU. But yeah, 3-second count is what we're taught. So
Okay. The in the tow list, the flap open message is about 6.5 to 7 seconds.
there you go.
Just is. Don't know why. Brian, it's good to see you. Appreciate you stopping by. I hope all is well, dude, and I very much appreciate you spending some time with me this evening. So we have the APU starting up. We have some flight plan stuff. Once the APU is operational, how about fuel pumps? What are we doing with the fuel pumps at this point? They still chilling off? They on yet?
Yeah, once again, it's kind of a technique thing. At my air carrier, the accepted norm is that once we've got the fuel onboarded onto the aircraft, we both looked at the release and said, okay, we've got what we're planning to have. It's kind of a reminder thing for us. So at that juncture, we'll turn all those fuel pumps on, and then we'll run the before start checklist to the line. So it's kind of serves as a memory thing, like at my carrier. But I've talked to other guys, and it seems like they do it maybe as part of the initial overhead setup when you first get in. I guess from a system standpoint, I don't really think it matters a whole lot, other than there's a small consideration or you've probably already guessed, if you're running the APU without any of the main fuel pumps on it, there's actually a dedicated like standalone pump that'll just come on automatically. So from a system standpoint, okay, there's a few things working differently under the hood there. But as far as, once again, answering your question directly,
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't really matter, but it just has to be done before the checklist is run, I guess, is really
Okay.
the hard line in the sand, let's say.
So we have our APU available, as you can see here. We've got some bleed pressure available, so we will go ahead and put on the APU bleed. APU bleed is good. Ground power disconnect. Anything else we need to do before we disconnect the ground power?
You do have to change so right now, this is a great example, Jason. Right now on the external power switch there, you
Yeah.
actually have to toggle the switch.
Okay.
So you hit it once and now it should say available. And now the plane is actually, you saw the flicker there. That's the relay is changing over. So it switched, of course, to the APU generator. And the reason why this is important is, in that instance, how we had it just a second ago, the plane was still drawing power through that external cord there in the jetway, let's say, or GPU, whatever you're using. So if you don't accomplish this transfer, um, and that power is still flowing, and you were to tell the ground crew to pull the plug, it's kind of like walking up to a computer and just pulling out the cord right out of the wall of things still drawing power, and it could cause an arc. And it might be a rare circumstance, but they teach us that, I mean, it could arc and hurt somebody outside there. So it's actually a very important step in the process that we need to manipulate that switch before you give the folks like this is the hand signal to disconnect the ground power there. So um, kind of a safety consideration, but
Okay.
certainly something that in the real world it needs to be remembered. Otherwise, you can hurt somebody
Right.
outside.
How about the seatbelt sign? When does that? So I'm in the back. I've got my iPad. I've just fired up episode 3 of The Witcher. I know I've got about an hour flight. I'm going to get my Henry Cavill on. When is it time for me to, lock in and have the staff in the back tell me to lock it up, buddy, lock it up?
Yeah, we'll usually do it, once again, kind of a technique thing, and it could certainly be subject to, like, the day that we're out there, what's going on outside the airplane externally. If we know there's going to be some more delays, you might hold off a little bit until right before we're getting ready to close the door. But the guidance they give us when we first get trained is like, we're trained to start the APU 10 minutes prior to departure. It just kind of works out nicely in the flow of everything that's going on. And at that same time, you'll turn the seatbelt sign switch on. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. It gives people a chance to kind of settle down. Maybe if they're in the lab or they're up putting bags away or something, that 10 minutes gives them a little bit of time to, get situated. So the flight attendants aren't having to, yell at everybody to get seated so we can get going. So,
Right.
you know, just as a general rule of thumb, it's kind of where we start with
Okay.
things. But
We'll put it on now. Everyone have a seat. So let's go ahead and let's talk about our performance takeoff data. So there is a built-in performance thing. Seattle, we've got a pretty stiff headwind, but nothing crazy. 9 knots. Flaps 1 with slats. You feeling dangerous? You want to do flaps 2? What's your poison here?
the 1+F is pretty standard for us, and especially in Seattle, you got the long runways there, and
Okay.
usually the performance isn't a huge issue.
Okay. So we'll do a 1+F, which gives us a V1 of 161, a V2 of 161, and a VR of 164. Transition altitude, we know in the United States, is 18,000. How about our thrust reduction acceleration height? We have it currently set to 1940, which I assume what it's probably doing is usually it's about 1,500 feet above ground.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's, just like you said, it's defaulted unless you make a user input, to do it at that point in time. And, you've probably got some awareness also. There are certainly situations where, let's say you're climbing out of an airport that's got some terrain. You need to maybe maintain this gradient, like a steeper climb to a longer point, or to make a climbing restriction. Let's say, sometimes they'll go in there and manually input something different depending on what the day holds for us. But most of the time, you'll just leave it at the defaulted setting there, and it works out pretty good for your normal engine out, scenario type profile if you
Okay.
need to fly through that.
Graham in the chat is asking, when do you shift from a 1F to a 2? Is it a runway length? Is it a weather? What's kind of a typical criteria to evaluate a flap 2 departure?
Yeah, that's an excellent question and kind of a hard one to really truly accurately answer because like all the time it works in the real world. I mean, all you do is you send off the data that we have to Aero data, and so they'll come back with whatever they come back with. So to be honest, like we don't really have such a tight awareness, I guess you'd say, of like what that teeter totter point is exactly. So I'd hesitate to even give you like
Sure.
a runway length or an outside air temperature or any one of those things. It's so subject to the weight of the aircraft, the atmospheric conditions, the runway, and all this stuff that it's just kind of in the back of your mind. And to be honest, it's just a little bit outside of the things that we're super concerned with, I guess you'd say, each day we're out there.
Have you? How about flaps 3? Do you do flaps 3 departures very often? Hold on, I think the feed cut out. Mike, do I still have you?
Okay, I still got you.
Oh, there we go.
Listen.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Sometimes when you're serving Twitch and Zoom, it's just too much. How about flaps 3?
Same kind of thing.
Okay.
It's I would say, okay, we're down in John Wayne Airport taking off on a short runway and a hot day. You could probably bank on, seeing a 3 setting a day like that, but kind of a rare one, I'd say, for us.
Okay. Okay. So I have put in flaps 1 here. So this THS, I use it as a scratch pad to indicate what my trim should be.
Yep.
Do you also do that? Do you leave it blank? What's
Yep.
your?
No, we'll certainly put in specifically, and you're spot on it. You're just like you said, you're putting in the trimble horizontal stabilizer trim setting there that's calculated out.
Okay. One of the things that I noticed is that it doesn't matter what you put here. So in this aircraft, and I believe P3D users, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter what I put here. The plane does not validate against it. Is that mirrored off of IRL? Like if I were to put an up 1.0, something just ridiculous, but
Yeah.
then I set it to a down 0.6, does the plane bark at you? You get an ECAM warning or anything?
That's a good question. I'm hard pressed to just off the top of my head. It's a very finite detail. When you do the takeoff config, I want to say that it should alert you in there because it's basically that takeoff config button is validating like everything that you've told the box you want to do. It's basically looking at and saying, okay, we got the flaps where we want it. We got the takeoff thrust where we want it, and I want to say the trim is part of that.
Okay.
And just because I'm not sitting in the thing,
No, hey,
I don't want to say something wrong, but
I would rather you say next question and we go from there. Just so we're clear, Mike is not currently in the cockpit, and as you all know, COVID-19 is a thing right now. So I think Mike, you had said what? It's been a month and a half.
it's been almost 2 months since I've actually been out in the real world there. It's been that slow.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as a result of that, I'm not going to make him sweat because at the end of the day, he's my guest and we got to make him feel welcome. So, we are not going to fly online for this first flight, just because it's just going to be easier, though Seattle Center is not on. But we will go all the way up to our cruise altitude of 330. Airman Roman with the Tier 1 sub. Thank you so much, Airman Roman. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we'll go all the way up to 330 here. Everything else is dialed. Let's call for pushback.
Hey, Captain,
here.
let me know where you want this thing.
And then, so this obviously isn't what it looks like IRL. This is an add-on mic that allows me basically to put the plane where I want it to because I don't have someone to talk to. So we'll back it out a little bit. We'll turn our butt around and we'll point the nose out.
Okay.
And then,
Great news, Captain. Your toe's coming.
assuming everything works correctly, it will put it there.
That's neat.
Sometimes it doesn't. But assuming everything works, that's where it's going to put it. Yeah. It as Graham just indicated in the chat, the pushback solutions that we have in the sim world are when they work great. When they don't work, they might take you for a ride.
Okay.
Oh, that's right, Andrew. I'm sorry. We had this conversation, dude. My bad. Yes, Andrew, thank you. Um, so yes, I think we've all witnessed or we've seen someone get taken for a ride. So hopefully we don't have that problem. So we
All
have our
right. Looks like
APU
the doors
running.
and hatches are closed, and we're ready to connect.
Fuel pumps, anything we're doing before we get pushed? Because I'm about to release my parking brake in about 30 seconds here, Mike.
Yeah, so the fuel pumps would be turned on at this point as part of the before start checklist. That would all be run through at this juncture. And I think we got, let's see everything else.
I'm going to come down here, so this has to be set to on. Dogo, good evening. Hope you're doing well. How about down here on our TCAS? We'll leave it at 2000. We haven't been assigned a squawk code. I have it set to standby.
Yep.
Should I move it, or is it good where it's at?
We go to, I'm trying to.
Welcome aboard, Captain. Toes connected, bypass pins inserted. Go and fill the parking brake when you're ready to go.
Standby, alt reporting off, expander, TA only, and TARA.
Yeah, I want to say that the labeling is slightly different, but it should be the transponder setting on this readout here. And then, we'll probably come back to it before takeoff. When you run that checklist and you're taking the runway, you go to TARA. But for right now, just the transponder setting is what we want.
Gotcha. How about tilt? Above, N, or below at this point?
Normally, you'd have it set to above, just as part of like the, when we're climbing out, that's what it's going to need to be on, or it's designed to be on anyways.
All right, parking brake is off.
Here comes the pushback. Light them up.
We'll turn our beacon on. I probably should have already had the beacon on, but I also like to start this bottom clock on the pushback. Is that a good strategy?
That elapsed time one actually is in the real world. We'll set that when we get our takeoff clearance.
Okay.
We'll use that to reference our elapsed flight time, essentially.
Do you run chrono at this point, or are you not running any clocks?
No clocks at this point.
No clocks. And yes, Andrew, yes, the beacon should have already been on. I should have had that beacon running before I released the parking brake. How soon before you push back, Mike, do you turn the beacon on? Like minute, 2 minutes?
It's just part of that checklist,
Gotcha.
And it's basically, I guess, like I'm trying to think of a technical way to encapsulate the words. Just before everything's all buttoned up before you do any aircraft movement or certainly any engine starting, of course, like it needs to be on. But, real world, you'll run that before start checklist all the way through. And so the beacons turn on as part of that. And so you have to do all that before you even contact the push crew. So it's just always going to be on at that point, even when you establish the contact with them.
Okay. And yes, Tim, as you pointed out, yes, that already should have occurred. Before I forget, seeing we are pushing back, engine number 1 or engine number 2?
Engine 1 always started first.
Engine 1 always started first. Okay. All right, so we got engine 1 coming up. That's doing its thing. How about our strobe lights, Mike? I have them in off. We clearly don't want them on when
just
we're
about done here. Go ahead and
back.
set your parking brake.
That's correct, yeah.
Would I put them in auto?
And we're disconnecting the tow. Give me just a moment.
We don't use the auto at my carrier, Jason. The strobe lights will come on when you're cleared for takeoff.
Okay. So Andrew asks, what lights don't you use during daylight? Is it just obvious ones not needed, like landing lights or taxi lights or maybe turn-off lights? Basically, are there different sets of lights under daylight versus nighttime conditions that become optional versus mandatory?
I'd say no. Actually, we're more or less trained to operate the lights, at the same times, let's say during the sequence of flight, or through any given sequence of flight. And it is actually, there's a whole lot of guidance from the FAA about like even the lights during the day when you might think, of course, it might not illuminate.
And we're disconnected. Signal and pin on the left. Take it easy and have a safe flight.
To other aircraft around us that are moving, or there's a prescribed convention, let's say, that when an airplane like taxis onto a runway, for example, there's a certain sequence of lights that'll get turned on just to let somebody know, let's say downfield, that hey, there's actually a plane on the runway now, and just to add awareness to the whole situation. So I guess that's the best answer I can give you is it's actually, you wouldn't think it, but during the daylight you're still using even these bright lights you would think might not have done something for you in that given example, I guess you'd say. But it is, like I said, more for the outside awareness.
Now that both engines have started, ignition back to normal?
Yep.
Okay. So I've got both engines running. APU
and
bleed.
Now is actually a time.
Oh no, please go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, just because you had asked about the chrono, right after the second engine is started, we'll actually start the chrono timer. The FO will always be the one starting the engine. So, I use the chrono, or everybody does, like in the world, use the chrono up on the glare shield anyways, that presents the little one in the nav display there. So, you're starting this 3-minute timer to let you know that the engine's had a chance to warm up and, everything's good to go before you apply takeoff thrust, essentially why you're doing that. But that's to answer that question about when you might use a chrono. That might be helpful to folks out there if they want to sim that.
Okay. Both engines running, APU bleed coming off?
Yeah, bleed off, and you can turn the APU off itself at the same time.
Okay. How about flaps?
Yeah, so there's a whole after start flow that the FO will actually do. So it starts up at the top panel, and this is one of those ones I was thinking about before we sat down. It's like you have all this muscle memory when you're sitting in the airplane.
Right.
So I'm trying to best from memory, but you'll start up at the top, and the first thing, if you were going to do a single engine taxi, you would bring the old electric pump on. We already got 2 running, so no need to go there.
Sure.
You've already turned the APU bleed and the switch off. And also, if you needed engine anti-ice for taxi, you can manipulate those this time.
Okay.
And then from there, you'll go down to the center pedestal. And the FO will arm the spoilers first. You'll pull up on the handle there.
Yep.
And then you'll slide over to the right, and you'll set the takeoff flap setting.
Okay.
And then you'll come up from there, set the trim setting.
Okay, which we said is going to be a down 2.
Okay.
That's probably pretty close. Let me check on the flight control. Yep, pretty good. Okay, down 2.
And then the last thing we'll do is we'll actually go on to the pressurization page. And this is one of those things in the last couple of years, like Airbus changed this, but I guess there had been some problems where the packs weren't getting fed bleed air. So it's one step they added in the mails that we always go to that pressurization page to make sure that both packs are showing green there. So that means they're getting flow through them. The engine bleeds in this case, of course, or powering the packs in the AC. But it's just like a verification step. And you'll just go onto that page and you can go back just to the normal display there.
All right, so am I ready for taxi, or do I start to do flight control checks before I start moving?
Well, in the real world, before we start moving, we'll run the after start checklist. So without it sitting in front of me, I'm hard pressed to throw you all the line items off it. But we'd of course run that, and it's just like verifying more or less everything that we've already done. But from there, then you'll start to taxi, and the captain, of course, like you're doing here, he'll be the first one that tests his flight controls first. So he'll actually verbalize flight control checks. So you as the FO, you'll look down, you'll verify, and you'll actually say, full up, full down, full left, full right. Okay, rudder check, full left, full right. And then that cues the FO to start his checks. And, you'll do it silently, but you'll look at all the indications. Then you'll start your after or your flow for the before takeoff checklist items. So kind of a lot of chunk of work that I'm describing, but
sure.
I didn't know if you wanted to go that far.
No, that is all good. One of the things, Mike, that I noticed, and this is is this a simism or an IRL? Notice if I do full left on the ground, that I also get full left rudder deflection. Should that happen?
No, it wouldn't do that just from the stick movement.
Okay. I haven't figured out if that's something that I have on my end or if it's some Tolisism or simism. How about my auto brakes? When do I arm those to max?
So those will get armed as part of that flow like I was talking about. The FO, after he does his flight control check, it cues him to start several switches that need to get manipulated before the before takeoff checklist to the line anyways, let's say, gets read through. So it'll be part of that sequence there. And it all just depends. This is a good question, and it's kind of a technique and a skill thing, I guess you'd say. A good captain knows that the FO is kind of loaded up with tasks right after he starts the number 2 engine. And if you're in a place that's a busy airport, you're going to be kind of rushed down at the end of the runway. A good captain will give you a couple extra minutes to work with. So he'll call for the number 2 engine start like earlier on in the whole process of taxiing the aircraft out to the end of the runway. But some guys, like they want to wait till the very last minute, and you're kind of scrambling to get everything done. And so that just the time compression and having to do all those switches and everything, it get a little cumbersome. But after a while, you get used to it. But,
gotcha. Okay. I've got my taxi light on. I probably should have turned that on before I started moving. Is there ever a situation where I might start taxiing in a non-movement area without a taxi light on? Or is that kind of what you were talking about earlier with those lights, where that's always a taxi light on regardless?
Yeah, good question. You're not supposed to. So you would turn the taxi light on. And once again, it's just to alert, maybe there's people still kind of around the airplane that, you can be creeping along, but just when they see the light going on, they know there's movement either imminent or already happening. So it's something you would turn on in the real world.
Okay. So we are now taxiing down. We are on our way down to 3-4 right on Bravo here. So as we're taxiing down, Captain Tim says yaw damper might cause the rudder to deflect opposite. Tim, I think, Tim, it's a toeless thing, and the reason why I think that, watch. Now it doesn't do it. Now that I'm moving, it is not doing anything with the rudder. So that's why I think it's something maybe that's funky with either X-Plane or the toeless or a combination of both. That's why I was curious if that mirrors the real world. So we're taxiing down. We're doing some last-minute checks. Are there anything as a pilot that I should be mindful of checking, talking about, briefing, planning?
That's a good question, Jason. There is, as part of that whole flow in the before takeoff checklist, we actually do something called a mini brief. So it's kind of like a final last, really quick run through of a few key items. And that's, we'll talk about, our initial climb altitude, what fix we're going to navigate to immediately after takeoff, what we're going to do if we fail an engine, and we kind of re-verify just a few of the settings. So it's kind of, as far as like briefings are concerned, like what we're actually going to do immediately after takeoff, that does get verbalized in a very standardized fashion. But there's typically not a lot of talking that gets done, from the time, we taxi out and we're out at the end of the runway, just, getting ready to take off. There's not a huge amount of, I guess, things that we wouldn't have already briefed ahead of time. We're just concentrating on getting that airplane, where it's supposed to be.
Okay. How about the takeoff config? So that's still blue, which means we haven't pushed it yet. When is that finalized for takeoff?
Yeah, good question. That comes at the end of that sequence of button pushing. Like I said, there, it's the last thing after you do the auto brakes max. You could turn your train on nav display on if you want it, and then you'll go down and you'll drop down and do the takeoff config test.
The lower ECAM, what menu is that on for takeoff? Is that on? Oh, don't mind me in the taxi. No. Just pretend like we're doing a good job, everyone. Pretend like we're doing a good job. What does that look like? Should that, you can see it's on like a wheel page, which appears to be the default.
Yeah, and my recollection, when you apply takeoff thrust, it should switch onto the engine page, and so it'll give you a few extra parameters. Just off the top of my head, I remember you could see like oil quantity, and there's some, I think the vibes are down there, and a few other things. Yeah, just the engine page pops up specifically to answer the question.
I also have a cabin check blue as well. When do you normally notify the back that like you're good to roll?
Once again, kind of a technique thing. Our manuals just say it needs to be done before you read through the checklist. We at my carrier, you try to give them at least 2 minutes prior to takeoff. More time, the better, let's say, is kind of a courtesy to the folks working in the back there. But I'd say on the average day, it probably gets done, let's say between 5 and 10 minutes prior to actually taking the runway and taking off.
Okay. Well, in this case, because there was no traffic on our way out, we're going to go ahead and expedite that here.
Sure.
One of the things that I always struggle with on the 321 versus the 319 is there's so many call buttons. On the A319 and the tow list, there's 2. On the 321, I've got forward, mid, all, aft, exit. I mean, holy Jesus. How many people are on this thing? This plane ain't that big.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's all set. We're getting ready to take the runway. So we are cleared for takeoff. Uh, let's not worry about anyone coming in or coming or coming out. What is our enter the runway flow here, Mike?
So once again, it's a checklist that gets called for. So we'll go before takeoff checklist below the line. So I want to say ours is 4 items. So you're verifying the actual runway that you've been cleared onto and that you're actually taking for takeoff. So we'll both look at that red sign and we'll verbalize it. We'll say, 3-4 right, 3-4 right, verified.
Okay.
Or rather, the FO will go to, let's say, TARA, and we'll confirm the takeoff fuel on board required and what we have. And I want to say it might have been the flight attendant notified thing. I should have pulled the checklist out for you guys.
Okay.
I could have just read them off for you, but those are the major ones.
And then lights at this point, landing lights to on.
Yep. If you're cleared for takeoff, yeah.
Okay. Takeoff for nose.
Mm-hmm.
How about turn off lights? Those on?
Yep.
Okay.
You would use them on once you're cleared for takeoff, yep.
And strobe, you said your operator goes on. They don't use the auto position.
Correct.
And then the wing lights on as well.
You got it.
Got it. All right. Let's go ahead and take the field here and get rolling. And we can turn up the sound.
Approaching 3, 4, right.
Just a touch. So there is an add-on, Mike, in X-Plane called XRAS, R-A-A-S, and that is what you just heard kind of shouting out.
Yep.
And then anything to be mindful of on our takeoff roll, I usually do some stick down
on
pressure.
Runway 3, 4,
Okay.
right.
That's the correct technique.
Try to keep it center line. Try not to make myself look completely foolish. Now, how about setting thrust? So these are CFM engines. How much thrust do you set before you consider that you've got 2 good engines? 30%, 50%?
Well, initially you'll move the thrust levers up to the 50% mark, allow like both the engines to spool up to that specified range, let's say. And then once they're both up there, then you'll continue the movement up into the flex MCT, I think is what we're doing.
Yep.
If we're doing a flex takeoff here.
We are.
So you really do want to kind of have that pause. That's like a lot of, once again, a technique thing. You can really feel this when some guys, some guys and girls that fly it, might be a little bit more, they'll give it a little extra second to verify. And that's kind of my technique. I really like to like verify, okay, yeah, we got 2 engines, like, spinning at their appropriate rates and everything. They're both spooled up, but you'll feel this next time you guys are riding in the back or whatever. You can feel it when the guys actually do a pause or when the guys and girls actually just go like straight up to the takeoff thrust setting. But the way it's designed is just like you're saying, Jason, like you want to, take a check to just
3,
that mid spooling
right,
sort of action
runway,
going on, and then
3,
you go up to the full power.
4, right.
Okay. All right. So there's our 50. We're going to give it that second, and we're going to go click, clack.
Yep.
Okay.
You got it. 2 clicks.
Gladiator, what's going on, dude? It's good to see you. So we're flex at 40, SRS runway, auto thrust is blue. It's 80 knots. And there's V1 and rotate. You don't want to slide that tail on the ground.
Yeah, you got it.
So positive rate. How about the gear? What is the sequence? So I am aware of the whole positive rate gear up, but yep. What is considered a positive rate?
A great question. Right out of the book, you're supposed to look down at that VSI. When you see that needle in the positive, that's what you're actually verifying. Okay, we've got a positive rate. We're getting away from the ground. Okay, yeah, we can bring that gear up.
Okay. All right, so we're getting the call for lever climb. Do you pitch and then drop into climb and wait for speed tape, or do you immediately go into lever climb when it tells you?
Kind of a technique thing. I like to actually pitch the airplane over and use that extra power that's in there to get it accelerating and get it going forward. So there's nothing that says you have to do it right at the second when the airplane, cues you to do it. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just kind of a technique thing. So it might be a couple of seconds of pause in between there until you've done just like you did. You pitched over, you got some speed, acceleration going, and then you can.
Well, because technically you're lowering the thrust commanded. And thus, if you still had too high of a pitch angle, you could create a problem. You could.
You got it. Okay. Yep.
All right, so our Mountain 1 departure, we're going to be NESUG above 4,000. We're going to meet that restriction. So we have S speed. We're about to pass that. We're flaps 1 with slats. The flaps have retracted automatically at S speed as they do in the 321. Bring the slats up right away now that we're past S speed. Okay.
Yep.
There's our green dot speed, and then we'll go 250. So NESUG, we're going to make the right turn on a 071 heading. So let's pretend that I am flying and you are doing your thing. When are you putting up the ground, when are you disarming the ground spoilers? How about lights? What is happening? Let's say you are the person not flying the aircraft.
Yeah, good question. So the pilot monitoring in this case, after the flying pilot calls for, he'll say flap 0 after takeoff checklist. So that, of course, cues you to make the final cleanup, move on the lever there. And then the flow, you'll disarm the speed brakes there. And you're just verifying that, the gear is up. Like we said, the flaps are retracted, and I'm trying to remember else the checklist calls for. But that's, I guess, it's a real small flow. There's not a lot to be done there. Oh, and just to verify the aircraft is pressurizing is the last visual check that you do. And so after you do that stuff by memory, then you'll pull out the checklist, you'll read through it silently, and then you'll talk back to the flying pilot and say, okay, after takeoff checklist is complete.
Do these pressures look good, Mike?
Verified all those steps there.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you go, I was going to say, usually if you go back just to the main page, if you take off the pressurization thing and we see the, I can't remember if it's which page is up now normally right now. I want to say it's the cruise one maybe.
I can give you the engine page if you want. I can give you condition. I can give you whatever page you want.
No, this is fine. That's all I was going to say is if you put it back into the normal position, I guess that whatever the plane would have you on automatically at this point in time. In our planes on the cabin altitude there's actually a little arrow that you just, it's really handy. You can glance down real quickly. You just say, okay, we're in the positive. The plane's registering a cabin altitude climb, and it's just, we're pressurizing, obviously.
Okay.
So,
we have passed 10,000 in our chat. We're still on a manual heading. We'll sort that out in a little bit. How about lights? Lights on up to 10,000? Is that a misnomer? I've heard kind of conflicting stories on that.
Yeah, it's certainly on up through at least 10,000 feet, and then it's, I guess, the way our manuals are written, if I recall correctly, and this is one of those ones that they've changed a handful of times in the last couple of years, but I believe at this point it's now a technique thing. Let's say you're leaving a really populated area, and there's a lot of air traffic around, and for some reason you wanted to keep the lights on a little bit longer, up to 18,000 feet, let's say. It could kind of, at your discretion, leave some of the things out there, but most of the time people just do it at 10,000 feet. And it's always a captain thing, so the FO is never really having to think about it. But yeah, 10,000 feet is when we, most of the time the lights get done and the flight attendants will get chimed to let them know, okay, we're through 10 now. You can start doing your thing in the back. What's going
on? Now, I would imagine, and we were obviously busy chatting and not working, that our nose light would have come off fairly quickly because the gear's up at that point, right?
Yeah, and it happens automatically, actually.
Even though the nose light goes off automatically.
When the gear retraction of the well, yeah, it'll actually go off, even though the switch might be in the the different position there. The bulb's actually out. Interesting.
Sure, and that makes sense because of heat, obviously.
Yeah.
Runway turnoff lights, are those on the 10,000 schedule, or are those on a separate schedule?
Same thing. At 10,000 feet, you can turn them off.
So I've gone direct Zadon. TechnoBiz, hello. Iowa Scotsman, hello. Good to see you both. Appreciate you stopping by. We're with Mike. He's keeping me honest here, ladies and gentlemen.
You're doing a great job, Jason.
Thank you, Mike. How about the weather radar? Now, just real quick, for the tow list, the modeling with the weather radar in active sky, for those of you that don't know, and I'm talking to you, Twitch chat, isn't always perfect. But let's pretend this is an IRL situation. We probably would have already done all this, Mike. But what is typically the dial configuration here?
I'm not sure if this one has it built into it. It seems like it does, but all the planes that I fly, they've actually got automatic settings for both the tilt and the gain, so that the plane will actually manipulate those things to show you what it thinks like the appropriate picture for whatever weather it's painting out there. But just simply, you'll turn on System 1 in this case with this type of setup. There's a little bit different panel where actually the FO and the captain both have their own on and off switches. Okay. But in this case, with this panel, we just go to the number 1 side there. And yeah, I mean,
how about this predictive wind shear? It is currently set to off. Would it stay in the middle or go to auto?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things. I'm sorry, we forgot the predictive wind shear will go to auto. Back when we were on the ground and the FO was doing that, I guess it was the flow after we did the second engine start. That'll actually get turned on at that point. Okay. So it would have been on this whole time.
Okay. Anything to do with the modes here? Is there anything that you toggle here, Mike? It's set to WX, but I have a WXT, a Turb, and a map.
Yeah, no, just the weather is normally what you'd have it on.
Okay. We have a question in the... Oh, before we ask the question, terrain radar, when does that come off? Or does it come off?
It's just a technique thing. There's I know guys, and I for whatever reason myself, I've kept it on, the whole flight for whatever reason. It's just kind of something to look at, I guess.
Sure.
But it's purely a technique thing. And one interesting thing about that terrain system on the Airbus is it will actually automatically bring up all that mesh rendering if you were in a situation where the jip whiz was going off and you're getting way too close to terrain. It's automatically going to bring it up. So interestingly enough, it's kind of just like an awareness thing, let's say. And nice to have, and you kind of get used to seeing it. So but maybe to paint some context to it, I mean, I pretty much always use it for takeoff and landing, and maybe once you get up 5,000-10,000 feet, I'll just switch it off.
Sure.
I don't need any more. It's irrelevant.
So Zafunk asks, do you turn on the tail light during day flights, and you keep them on above 10,000 feet even at night?
Yeah, I believe he's referring to the logo light then. Yeah, it just stays on. And I know it's kind of, I guess it's kind of a weird one. I want to say, like, obviously during the day, you're not going to be able to, like, see the illumination, let's say, on the tail. But I want to say on the switch up there, I think that the nav light is actually, it controls both of them. If we can take a look at it again real quickly, it should say, like, nav and logo, I think.
It does.
So we kind of don't have the option, right, to manipulate them separately. So it's just always going to be on by virtue of the fact that it's tied to that same switch there, if that makes sense.
Excellent. Zafunk, if that answers your question, cool. If you have additional questions or it doesn't, please obviously let us know. All right, so we're climbing up to cruise. We've got I've got my performance, my progress, pardon me, on the right hand side here. Let's just do a quick KMSO. We've got about 300 miles to run. So you're busy talking to ATC, you're catching up on the weather, stuff like that. What are some of the things that you're kind of regularly checking, monitoring, talking about, related obviously to the flight?
Yeah, great question. The fuel, of course, is always something that's, we're just always watching that. Most of the time, we've already checked all our boxes. We've done so much planning between, like, before the flight and actually taking off, verifying all these things. But, we're certainly keeping an eye on it. Above and beyond that, once an hour, we'll usually do like a full systems check just to verify that, everything is normal and just things are operating as expected. So we'll, like, once an hour or so, we'll just scroll through all the pages of the status display there and just take a look at things. I guess that, that's pretty much it for the general stuff. Now, of course, like, if you're once again, depending on the day that you're flying, if you're taking off and you're headed towards the East Coast and you already know there's like a major storm system moving back there, I mean, that might be a topic of conversation that you're like throughout the course of like several hours across the country, you're like, hey, let's keep an eye on like the next rad. Let's see where the system's going. Let's keep dispatch in the loop. Let's talk to them about, what's happening with those airports back there. Should we expect any delays? Like, is there going to be any change to our plan? Are we going to need to divert? Like all these types of things, on a day like that would certainly get talked about, throughout the course of the flight, even a few hours out from arrival. I don't know if that answers
it does.
It
does.
For you, Jason.
Absolutely. We have a question. What's the difference in the setting 1 and 2 on the nav logo switch?
Yeah, we mentioned it a little bit when we were getting going there, but there's actually 2 bulbs in the wings there, and it's just a redundancy thing. So switching from the number 1 to the number 2 just alternates between system 1 and system 2. In other words, bulb 1 and bulb 2. And it's just kind of like a wear thing. You want to wear the bulbs evenly. And we had mentioned it before, just as like an interesting little bonus thing. At my air carrier, anytime the captain's flying a leg, it's on the number 1 side. Anytime the FO's flying his leg, it's on the number 2 side. So it ensures that they get cycled through equally.
I don't know to what Mike is saying about the bulbs. Let's see here. So we've got a red dot kind of on the outer side, and we're in the 2 position. So let's step down to the 1, and let's see what happens. And sure enough, it has moved on the inside. Sorry, that's not an amazing camera angle there, but yeah, it has absolutely moved a little bit. So that also answers that question.
There you go.
My camera angle is terrible. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, come on. So there you go. Oh, Matt, I'm happy to hear that, dude. The Flight Factor 757 is running like a trip. That's awesome news, dude. Very, very exciting, Matt. So happy to hear that. I saw that there was an update, Matt, that came out the other day, yesterday or the day before. So I was really happy to see that. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, before I forget, and I was chatting with Mike about this, but it's important that we talk about this. Bam. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a little while. My preview copy from Thrustmaster got lost in the mail. Wink, wink, wink. But I can assure you that the box is coming. We should have the side stick next week, maybe? And then we'll have the throttle at the end of September. So, oh yeah. If you're wondering what we're talking about this. I realize this is the UK store. If you're out of the loop on what is this is what Thrustmaster announced this morning. And it pretty much looks externally like a T16000M, which is what I have. But they have partnered with Airbus. I think just about every big streamer this morning had it. Chewy, Captain Canada, Q8, Pilot Chops, Flight Chops. So by now, many of you have probably seen it. And to Andrew's point, it's really hard to beat, because one of the things that we've talked about, yeah, Iowa Scotsman, I'll be very curious what the feel is like, because one of the things that we've talked about on a prior channel, and Mike, I don't know if you're familiar with this company. I don't know why you would be, but you might. This group out of the UK and makes home simulator professional equipment. And when I say professional equipment, like, it's pretty much about as real as it gets. And they obviously care about precision and craftsmanship. However, I don't know about you all, but 984 pounds, while yes, I can bench press that, I cannot afford that, because that only gives me a side stick. I can buy out like 1/3 of Thrustmaster's inventory for one of these. Someday, ladies and gentlemen, if I hit the lottery after I buy my Pilatus PC-12, we'll circle back to that. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, the road to 100K, and that's not followers, is a real thing. So
it's a long road, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a long
I know.
road. Oh, yes, Arrow Raider. It's good to see you, brother. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for stopping by. So we're flying, we're hanging out, we're having a good time here. Let us just talk briefly about what we have going on. I was telling Mike about the tools that we as simmers have with Navigraph, and I showed him Sim Toolkit Pro. Yeah, Ashman, we're going to have to up the tech support big time. Tim, yes. You know, Tim, everyone that had a copy was saying how amazing it was. So I'm very excited about it. I love the T16000M, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the new one is even better. Bill with the raid! Good evening, everyone's from Bill's stream. My name is Jason. I appreciate you all stopping by. I have Mike with us this evening. Mike is a professional bus driver by trade. I saw him at the grocery store. He didn't have his mask on. I gave him grief, and he's like, dude, I fly an Airbus. I don't need a mask. And I was like, oh, well, I'm sorry. Do you want to come on Twitch tonight? He said, sure. We split a panini. It was delightful, and here we are, ladies and gentlemen. So, who knew? But for those, in all seriousness, no, I'm a big fan of Mike's YouTube channel, and it's spamming in the chat every couple minutes. But Mike is kind of talking us through here so that when I stream and talk about I'm a professional sim Airbus pilot, that I don't sound like a total idiot when I do it. So that's kind of where we're at. Our arrival. Oh, and most importantly, Bill, I saw you were flying with the missus. How did that go in the Citation? I always enjoy when you fly the Cessna Citation, so I hope you had an outstanding stream and an amazing night, and thank you again for the raid, sir. I really appreciate it. We are headed into Missoula International, and I've been here once before, and one of the things that I noticed about this arrival, ooh, an IRL flight? Baller! Nice job, Bill. That's awesome. Oh, okay. We have a question from Zafunk. How do you deal with turbulence?
I guess from a very general standpoint, I'm trying to think like in the regard aerodynamically, right? We have turbulence penetration speeds that if it's getting like violent enough and bad enough, we'll actually want to slow the aircraft down and try to avoid, structural damages or overspeeding or things like that. Just in general, also for passenger comfort, we'll try to change altitudes or, find some smooth air as best we can. Also too, just, just kind of big picture stuff, briefing people ahead of time or kind of preparing them if we're expecting to go through some turbulence at some point. It's just like a, technique thing, like nice to, know for the passengers and of course the service folks in the back, they're up and walking around. But we obviously try to avoid it the best we can, but just, it is what it is some days, and you kind of gotta go through some rough rides here and there.
Yeah, I made a fatal mistake of having a big breakfast and then flying in the back of a 757 over Cleveland into Newark, and it was not a good couple of minutes. So we've got always an excellent screenshot from our good friend Hornet, who is the master with his LEAP engines, just rubbing it in my face. One of these days, there is a visual mod, Mike, that allows you to put the LEAP engines, the CFM LEAPs, on the aircraft. I don't know off the top of my head which carriers have them and which don't, but they certainly look cool.
It's a gorgeous engine.
Yeah.
It's like a work of art in and of itself. Just that thing alone is just like amazing to look at, up close. It's just like such an engineering marvel to me. It's just crazy.
We have a question from a Delta pilot here. How do you find smoother air? Is that based off reports or actual weather from the, I'm assuming, National Weather Service?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we have a lot of tools available ahead of, our flight time where you can look out predictably and get some graphical representations of where, what altitudes and what general geographic regions turbulence can be found or is expected to be found. But, in the real world, we're constantly relying on pilot reports. So, you'll be in a given sector with a large number of aircraft and everybody's talking, and the controllers, of course, like relaying for everybody else. He's saying, hey, this American flight up ahead got smooth air at 360. Do you want to climb up there and try that out? Okay, yeah, if they got smooth air, we'll go up there. So it's, kind of a real world feedback thing in that sense. Yeah, so I'd say between like PIREPs or pilot reports and the predictive tools we have, it's really the biggest things that we have to figure those things out. But of course, there's general stuff. I mean, you're going over the Rocky Mountains and you see lenticular clouds, you can expect a smooth ride kind of thing. Or if you're close, to an area of storms, of course, there's turbulent air in association with that. So. And I would say it's just like a big picture where you're taking all the pieces of data input and just trying to figure out, hey, well, with all these little things I've been told, what's my best bet, for this area here to avoid turbulence.
Actually, the old Northwest Airlines Turb Plot program still is operational now these days. Tim, it's kind of a running joke on the internet, about light chop from Delta pilots, and obviously I don't know how much of that is a meme or how much of that is actually true. So that's why I referred to Brian as a Delta pilot asking about smooth air.
There you go.
I think if I recall, there's a SID or a STAR actually in Atlanta that also pokes fun of that as well. But someone can correct me if I'm wrong or right on that. I know that some of the airports have fun intersections and waypoints on their SIDS and STARS. You've got the Hobbit one, you've got the Star Trek one. Orlando has a bunch of Disney themed ones. Hollywood, LA area has various Hollywood themed ones. In old days, we use code 0 to code 9 on Turbulence. Does that sound familiar at all to you, Mike?
Yeah, there's actually on some of the flight plans formats that at previous carriers, there was a column. It was like a shear value, and that was in like that 0 to 9, I guess. Right? I want to say ours, for some reason, my memory is escaping me because for whatever reason they chose to omit that in the current format that we get at our carrier right now. But yeah, there was it's just like a numbering convention. It would give you some idea, where the max shear values were for your given route of flight over every one of the points of navigation. When you look at the body of the flight plan, you can look, line by line and say, okay, we're over Cleveland, we're expecting a 9 shear value.
Gotcha. Yes, Gladiator, Goofy 5, correct. There's some fun Disney ones in the greater Orlando area, and it's always fun when you fly into some place for the first time and you see that. You see like witty waypoints, especially because they usually read in like a sentence structure as you fly, down or up the star. So we are, according to this, we're about 85 miles from our top of descent, Mike. We haven't really programmed anything on the arrival. We probably would have done that already. But based on the winds and whatnot we're seeing here, we can anticipate landing to the south. Winds are 17 at 6. We have runway 12 and 30 available, so we'll plan on runway 12. How about we have some ILS, we have a Zulu, we have a Yankee, we have an RNAV Yankee, we have an RNAV Zulu. What is your preference for us? Yankee, Zulu, what does that matter?
Well, in the real world, the Zulu, of course, is your full-blown like RNP approach, and there's actually a little bit more setup steps that we're directed to take, and it's a little bit more tedious, not a whole lot, but like just being honest with the real world. I mean, if you're going in there on a good weather day, you're not going to necessarily take the time to do like the full-blown setup for a full RNP. So in that case, maybe the Yankee would work nice. It's just a really simple, straightforward approach. It's just easy, one less thing to brief.
ILS versus RNAV, if given the choice, is there a preference?
I think most guys just kind of default to the ILS procedure. It's just what everybody's used to, and we're so used to just, every day it's an ILS for the most part. So
okay.
I think Most of us just kind of get a little bit, I don't want to say lazy after a while. You're just like, well, I'm used to this will work fine.
Hey, no, you know what? Sometimes it's not a matter of being lazy. It's just kind of a creature comfort. When you go home, you want mom's chicken noodle soup. You can get Campbell's anytime, man, but you want mom's chicken noodle. So we'll plan for the ILS Yankee 12. So ILS 12 Yankee. There's no star coming in. And we have some VIAs. We see that we have a VIA off of Men in Black, or whenever the E is first and last, they drop each other out. So we go Men in Black, which is off a DME arc to the east. That's not us. We got Gyros, which is a DME arc off to the way south. So that's not us. We have MLP. MLP is a VOR, and I don't know if we've budgeted appropriately to allow for that ground track. So let's see what we got here. The MLP VOR, which is actually one of our waypoints. So let us plan that. So we will plan to do our transition, our initial approach fix off of MLP, and then we'll bring up our taxi chart because we're going to need that. So let's just get caught up in chat here. Shear is a bit different. We would literally have special JEP used to plot TP. And Brian realized that there was a waypoints for the Three Stooges. That's super cool. I did not know that either, Brian. Dave Grimmy has a question. What's your favorite and least favorite about the aviation industry, not particularly regarding flying?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I'd say the least favorite thing, might be, let's say the volatility. This is certainly so relevant right now. I mean, January 1, 2020, everything was just going crazy. There's growth, there's hiring, there's, expansion. And here we are 6 months later, it's kind of doom and gloom with the whole COVID thing. So that's just something that's always, present with the industry as a whole. And it is a challenge. It's something that takes a lot to mentally overcome and emotionally. And of course, financially, people are at all different points in their lives and what they're doing. So it's a challenge. As far as the favorite though, I'd just say, the family and the community amongst, the aviation crowd is just, for me, it's just felt second to none. I mean, I've never been a part of, something that had such a widespread amount of folks that were passionate and enthusiastic and excited about it. And for the most part, I feel like, most people are just having fun, when they're at work, you're out flying planes. It's a job that not a lot of people get to do. And the ones that are there, they really love it. They really enjoy it. And it's just cool to be a part of that crowd and that community.
Very cool. I hope that answers your question, Dave. If you have additional questions, please let us know. Amtrak, hello, good evening. I hope you're doing well. How is the Metroliner and the Acela running? Good, positive, fast? I love me the Acela, dude. Growing up on the East Coast, off of, I don't know if you're familiar with Amtrak. I hope maybe you are. Sure. Yeah, I was off of the not the Capitol. You know what? We've got a couple minutes. I'm going to look it up. While we do that, Zafunk asks, how often do pilots use Autoland?
It's pretty rare, actually. Very occasionally you'll do it, just because the plane actually needs to have like a demonstrated Autoland in some sort of time interval. And I'm hard pressed to tell you off the top of my head, but sometimes you'll see like on the dispatch release that, maintenance has like asked you to do this Autoland just to like retest the system and say that it's okay. Those instances are pretty rare. And as far as like the real world, when the actual weather conditions get down to the point where you actually need to do it, I mean, I want to say for me, the last couple of years flying, it's been like one or two a season, if that. So pretty rare in general.
Okay. And we're talking about Amtrak, so don't mind that. James, I have not heard anything about what's going on with MS flight. I'm not in the beta, the alpha, whatever you call it. So Amtrak, Mike is a professional bus driver. He's the one typically moving the stick. I'm the one that's in the back having my apple juice, catching up on my Netflix. Ross, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for stopping by. So we are very fortunate to have Mike here, and he's answering our questions and chatting, and we're talking through some stuff. So, Mike, we have our top of descent needle coming in about 20 nautical miles. So I probably need to go back here and put in some performance data. Realistically, we probably would have done this sooner.
Sure.
But let's go ahead and kind of dip, dive, and dodge and put this in real fast here. And Amtrak with the follow. Thank you. James, we are, out of respect for Mike's privacy, we are not discussing the carrier for which he flies. And our decision is 5,022. Oh, man. Been a while since I've done a 4-digit MDA. Yikes. How does that look, Mike? Does that look good? Does that look pretty programmed?
Yeah, I think you got all the fields in there as needed.
Okay. How often do you do a flaps 3 or a config 3 versus a full?
Kind of a rare thing. I want to say, I don't know, maybe 10% of the time, let's say.
Cool. Okay.
For the flap 3 anyway.
Right. Okay. And go ahead.
I was just going to add like a little more real world context to that. I mean, like generally the flap 3 business is just about these situations. If you're flying down through a very like a windy or a gusty situation, the book talks about using the flap 3 setting, of course, like, you know, because you can carry a little extra speed and have a little bit of extra like buffer margin, let's say, in this type of situation. And if you did have to go around for wind shear or something, it's just a little bit less drag in the mix as compared to when you have full in there normally.
So one of the things that I like to do, Mike, is around 10 nautical miles before the top of descent, I like to start the process a little early. I don't wait for the big drop to sort of pull me down. Is that a fairly standard process?
Yeah, great technique. 5 to 10 prior, I'd say, is a very real world thing that people use, and you got it spot on. It's certainly a little bit more comfortable of a transition when the plane has a chance to, you know, start a gradual descent, and then it gets into the profile descent where it pitches down a little bit more. It's just a smooth way to do it. Very good.
Completely unrelated to the big drop, I watched with my wife the other night Pacific Rim. It had been a while. I've seen the movie like 500 times. I'm not gonna lie, the soundtrack and the sets that he did. Have you seen that movie, Mike, Pacific Rim?
I haven't. No.
It's pretty fantastical. It's Rock'em Sock'em Robots versus Godzilla, and and with like a little bit of Voltron. But as a child of the 90s, you give me a electric guitar, Guillermo del Toro, Godzilla, kaijus, Jaegers, fires, explosions, and some of the best shoes I've ever seen in my entire life on Ron Perlman. And ladies and gentlemen, you've got magic. All right, so we are beginning our descent. You can see that we're getting ready to pick up our vertical profile. There is our green donut. How about seatbelts? When do I typically, assuming the weather's not super crazy, when do we start talking about seatbelts?
Yeah, at the latest, you'll turn it on at 18,000 feet, but you already kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's certainly subjective to, you know, if you're going in there on a day when you know there's wind ripping over the mountains there and you're expecting it higher out. I mean, you might even, you know, tell the folks to get seated and the flight attendants to clean up a little bit earlier and have it on, you know, before you even start the descent, maybe in some cases, you know, maybe kind of a rare thing. But so it just, hopefully it gives you an idea of there is a lot of discretion in between, like the most extreme, you know, on either end between, you know, when it comes on. But typically, let's say like on an average day, you know, between 30 and 25,000 feet, wherever that occurs.
Okay. Digi with the raid. Digi, good evening. Thanks for stopping by, dude. Hello, everyone from Digi Stream. Hope you had an amazing stream, dude. I appreciate you hanging out with us this evening. How about the tilt on the TCAS? Anything we need to tweak here? Should we drop this to below?
Yeah, you can use the below setting there. That's a normal thing we'll do.
Kithrick, what's going on? Angry Panda with the follow. Good evening. Hope you're doing well. My name's Jason. I appreciate you stopping by. Kithrick, it is good to see you. Digi, also good to see you. Oh, Digi, I'm so happy to hear that. Mike, should I have had it already in below at cruise, or was I okay with it above that entire time?
That's a good question. Once again, kind of a technique thing. My personal technique, and the way that I was taught by some of the folks that I respect their style, is they'll actually put it in below as soon as we level off at the cruise altitude. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you were in the situation where you had to make an emergency descent, let's say you were depressurizing or something, it's just one less switch you got to reach down and turn on if you want to have some awareness about what exactly is going on below you. And if you're in this like high rate descent type of situation, it's just better to have a little bit more awareness of that. And like, if you think about it, like you don't really need to know who's that high above you, so you wouldn't have it on above. And even like the normal one, it's like, okay, well that shows you like both of like the enhanced range above and below the aircraft. But to me, it just clutters the screen unnecessarily. And like I said, if you're really being like, what do we actually need to see on this in, like I said, that emergency descent type of situation, it'll be the below setting. So it's like, that's my technique, but you see people do it all kinds of different ways. It's a technique.
Speaking of emergency descent, our VNAV got a little sassy there as we were plummeting to the Earth at 5,500 feet per minute because I accidentally put us into open descent. Whoops, my bad. Seatbelt sign definitely coming on now. We have a stale question that I missed earlier from Digi here, or Dave Grimmy. My apologies, Dave. What are some of the most important pieces of advice regarding safety and PDM for general aviation pilots? Specifically, fresh private pilots?
Oh gosh, there's safety is such a wide-reaching net. But I mean, for somebody just getting out of their initial training, I would say that right from the get-go, like try to be as like safe, procedural from day one. If your intent is to become a professional, and really for anybody that's flying airplanes anywhere, I mean, it's really it's easy when you're first starting out to get lulled into like, oh, you want to push the limits a little bit, or you want to show off to your friends, or you want to, any number of things. But it's like, just challenge yourself to like always be by the book, like always just, hey, we don't push boundaries. We don't, if the book doesn't say to do it, don't do it. We're not test pilots. We're not, here to prove anything. Like, we're just, like I said, there's going to be those temptations, like wherever you go, if you're flying, be it flying into some questionable weather or, biting off more than you can chew. Just try to, I guess that's the one biggest thing, especially in the beginning, I could, coach and advise to somebody, is just to, don't be too daring too fast. You don't have anything to prove to anybody. Just go by the book. Be one of those guys or girls in the world.
Excellent. Digi, you went to Grand Canyon and then to Vegas, Tahoe to Sacramento. Digi, you were out by my way, dude. You were out by my way. We had good weather too. It was a little warm, but we had good weather. AVI or Rooster, it's good to see you. Kithrick wants to know where you put the key, and I believe Kithrick, the key goes right here. That also might be a blower. So yeah. You know what, Kithrick? We're gonna put the key right. We'll put like a key slot right there, dude. Just it'll be our little secret. It's all good. Flight, it's good to see you, Flight. Mike, Flight X52 is he is a 175 captain.
Okay.
And Mike also spent some time in the 175 and also has some of those videos on his YouTube channel.
Cool.
Flight, I have been flying the 195 for a JetBlue virtual airline. I'm not going to say I'm falling in love with it yet, but I have been enjoying it. It's the SSG one. We've been having a pretty good time with it. A little spotty on the landing. I still come a little fast. All right, let's get... Rooster wants to know... Let's circle back here. Poro, I missed your follow. Thank you very much, dude. Appreciate you hanging out. My name is Jason. I hope you're doing amazing. Thank you so much for stopping by this evening. We have some... Let's see here. I want to start flight school this year. What are some tips I need to know when flying? Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Gosh, that's an open-ended one. I would say, kind of come back to what I mentioned before. Just don't be in a rush to push yourself to do anything you're not comfortable with doing. And if when you're first, getting started, I mean, there's a tremendous amount to learn, and just I don't know, just don't push yourself too hard. And it kind of comes back to that whole like being safe thing, and it just take it. People learn at different rates and paces, and just take it to what feels comfortable to you. And if you're not comfortable going out by yourself, or that something the instructor has tried to teach you and you're not ready to do it on your own or whatever, just don't be afraid to go at your own pace, really.
Kethrick, that is a bit.ly that I put together for his YouTube, so that's totally safe. That's not going to take you to some website where you're going to have a bad time. You'll actually have a good time. So that is he has a great 60+ video series about what all these buttons do, which is part of the reason I'm not spending a ton of time on some of the nuances, because many of you already know what they are. Plus, I encourage you to check out his YouTube channel. But we are trying to cover some various bases here. I missed Gladiator's question. My apologies, Gladiator. Let me circle. Here we go. How do you figure out what SIDS and stars to use? Thank you, Glad. My apologies.
Yeah, great question. Glad to hear you there. It's usually prescribed, actually, before we even get close to the airport. The dispatcher has a lot of times planned us, via the route they filed us actually onto a SID or star. If there is a situation where either we feel the need to switch it up, you can certainly make the request while you're en route and get the controllers to just reissue a new clearance. Or there are some cases where, if the airport's just completely turned around from a north operation to a south operation, let's say, they'll just give it to you. They'll assign it to you. They'll just tell you. So there's rarely, I'd say, circumstances where, we're really having to make that decision ourselves, like barring that one, where I mentioned if for some reason you wanted to do something different, there's nothing that says you can't do it. But most of the time it's just like, here guys, this is what we need you to fly, go do it. It's like, okay, one less thing I got to think about.
Gotcha. Mix, good evening. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you're doing well. Let's see here. Have a question. Okay. Poro asks, I have a question. Is it worth it to get your PPL prior to going into college?
Yeah, I would say, Poro, that's the one thing. If I could look back, and the things I would do differently with my progression is, like, if you have the means, the sooner you can go through all these things, the better. I know it's hard to get through flight training. I know it's expensive. It is a challenge, but like I said, I know for me, I just wish I had worked a little bit harder early on and got those licenses, sooner. And just, you're going to be so far ahead of the game, especially like if you go into college, let's say, with the private pilot already done. Of course you can focus on your studies, but you might actually be able to get up through your CFI while you're still in college, and then you can turn around and start building the time and everything. So it's just like, I guess that the biggest thing that I can say is just do everything you can as early as you can do it if you're trying to go down the career track, if you have the means. I know it's hard, but
yeah. Rooster is saying he's in Civil Air Patrol, which is helping him get his PPL right now.
Excellent. That's a great organization to be involved with.
And greetings from Sacramento, California. I appreciate, Mix, you joining me. We're going to pause on the questions just real quick and remind me to circle back to this. So we are getting ready to descend on our arrival here. We have our intercept at 8,600. We're going to slow down. You can see that it's already activated our approach, and that's why we've actually, it's going to slow us down to green dot, which we probably don't want. Rooster, thank you so much for that follow. So, Mike, in this case, because we've engaged the automatic approach mode, I would probably go selected speed here. And what are you thinking? 210, 200? We are... let's see. Looks like we're about 20 miles from the field.
Yeah, about 20 miles out. Yeah, I'd say, you're between 250 and 210 knots, let's say.
And this is a good question. It does become a little bit tricky. You know, when you're going into a busy airport, obviously everything is highly speed controlled, and it really kind of takes the mental game out of it for the pilot. But you know, going to a place like Missoula, it's a lot of times they're just like, hey, do whatever you want until you got to slow down. They don't really assign you things. So it's like there is this cognitive process that's going on in your mind. You're like, okay, are we really high and we want to keep the speed up to get that descent going down, or are we like, you know, we want to slow to get some drag out maybe, or like it's so subjective to like where the plane is and where you're at mileage wise from the field. So I guess to directly answer your question, you know, about 20 miles out, yeah, 210 will work fine.
Okay. So many of you have probably seen the video where you say, you know, flaps 1 speed check. In this case, we've passed these two little bars right here at about 238, which means we're slow enough to put flaps 1 out, which we've now done. And in this case, flaps 1 is kind of funky on an Airbus. Dave, thank you for hanging out. It's kind of funky because it's actually not flaps. It's just slats. So in this case, we are slats 1. But you can see that we're getting ready to intercept here, and we are probably going to dip a little. My guess is we're going to be good on profile, but we're probably going to be a little fast. So I'm going to dial back the speed to 200. There's something about the A321. It's a slippery little devil. And I have many times come in too fast and too high. So what I like to do is I'm going to open descent. I'm going to slow to 200, and then I'll intercept from above, which we'll see how that goes. I don't want to get too high, so hopefully as long as I can get slow, then maybe I can get low. Let's see here. I shall be heading out soon. Poro, yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Poro. How about auto brakes? I'm thinking low. We've got a we've got a 9,500 foot runway.
Yeah, low's just fine.
Okay. All right. Speed's looking good. Let's do flaps 2. And we'll do auto brakes low. We're going to arm our speed brakes. Let's come upstairs. We should have done lights earlier. Lights, camera, action. Let's do the nose too, just so we don't forget. All right, so we are on our way down the hill here. I'm going to dial the speed back, actually, so we can catch up. Let's leave it at 200 here. And our go-around altitude is 9,100. So this is what I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to live a little dangerously. Autopilot's coming out. We're going to go up to 9,100. And let's fly it the rest of the way here. While we're chatting with Mike, I'm going to do a good job, or as best a job as I can with the speed and flying the plane and chatting with Mike. So we did have a question. Let's see here. Meant for solo, for full thing. I think we're good on the chat. So, all right. Let's go ahead and get serious about our arrival here. Let's go into manage speed. I'm going to arm the approach. We're flying the ILS, so let's go ahead and also put the LS on. You can see here that we are high, but what I'll do is I will try to intercept at about 1,000 feet per minute. As we know, our glide is about 800 feet per minute. Let's see if we can slip under it. So, Mike, I am now high on the approach. And let's pretend you probably wouldn't be this high and this fast on the approach IRL, obviously. But you're high, you're fast, maybe you got a slam dunk approach from the controller, which is pretty common on VATSIM. What are some tips and tricks to handle when you're high and good on speed, and then high but also fast?
Well, you know, the first one, you know, the high and fast, you know, it really just depends. And to be honest, like some situations just plain out are not salvageable. So, I mean, if you've exhausted all your options to get more drag out, like i.e. the speed brake's full, you've thrown the gear already, and, you know, maybe you've even slowed, you know, further to get the last couple, you know, notches of flaps out, you're doing all you can, it just might not work out. But, you know, the other times, as far as like, you know, certainly you'll find yourself high here and there, and a lot of times it is rectifiable. I would say that the number one thing in like the situation you're at right now, you know, the best option would probably be like speed brakes here. I'm
okay.
Trying to figure out the mileage. So, yeah.
As far as to run, we've got 9 miles to run.
Okay. Yeah, so your flaps 2, and I think you're slowing to 180 there. I think
Yep.
it looks like.
Yeah,
Or I'm sorry, 160. You got.
we're flaps 2. I've put the gear out. We are definitely going to intercept. We're sinking at about 1,500 feet a minute.
Okay. Yeah, or even I think you're below the tick mark there. I'd even go flaps 3, like in this sort of situation.
Okay.
And definitely a good move.
Now, when you said that you can't salvage, so
Yep.
when do you initiate a go around? Like, if I am, what are we? We're 7 miles from the field. Let's pretend that there's no way that I can salvage this.
Yeah.
I'm sinking 2,000 feet per minute. I'm still way too high. Now I'm going to be too fast.
Yep.
I don't go around 10 miles away from the field, do I?
You could. They'd call that like a soft go around, and it'd just be like maybe a gradual climb up and a revector back around. There's a lot of different ways that this could shape up, and what I will say is like you will let's say you are in that situation, you're 10 miles out, and you just know way upstream that it's not going to work out. The professional thing to do is just to peel it off, come back around, do it again, and not try to do this heroics of like getting down. But on the far end of that other extreme, and we have this like stabilized approach criteria that we need to adhere to, and it's right in the manuals. It's a very standard thing for every air carrier anywhere. So you're supposed to be stabilized by 1,000 feet. You've got between 1,000 and 500 feet to more or less right the situation to some extent. And if by 500 feet you're not stabilized, you're not within the parameters that you're supposed to be in, you're supposed to initiate a go around at that point no later than 300 feet above the field elevation there, the runway anyways. So that's kind of like the absolute latest that you would want to do it. But like I said, most of the time when you get that slam dunk, it's pretty apparent early on in the approach. And just after doing it enough times, you just kind of know what feels right. I mean, you got the butt of your feeling, the seat of my pants, like the feeling in your butt kind of thing, like tells you like way before like the controllers and the plane starts telling you. So like you just know. So
all right,
that answers the question.
that is very helpful. We are 700 AGL. We're on speed. We're on profile.
1, 2.
2 white, 2 red. We are landing. Everything looking good. We've got a slight quartering headwind from the right, and we're going to take this down. And then we have a question from Kithrick regarding dispatch that we will get to once we're on the ground, Kithrick.
400.
All right, there's our land enunciation. Small movements on the stick. This is where when I first started flying this plane that I would sometimes get nervous and I would just start jerking it all around. You know what? That's not that didn't sound right. I would apply too much pressure too quickly.
50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 10, 5.
And I think the hardest part for me sometimes is in the flare. So idle reversers, we have our brakes rolling, and we're holding that center line. When am I putting my reversers away, Mike? 70, 60 knots?
Yeah, the book says stowed by 70.
Stowed
or at least
at
out
70.
Of the detent, let's say. Or out of max reverse, anyways,
okay.
If you want to get really technical.
And one of the things that you talked about on your YouTube video, and I enjoyed watching it, was the concept of how the auto brakes work versus low versus medium.
600
and it was very insightful
remaining.
for me because of the differential toe brakes. You had indicated that you'll typically leave the auto brakes in almost all the way down to taxi speeds, especially because you don't want to have a situation where the plane comes to a hard stop and then you got to gas it to make a taxiway. And I thought that was very interesting, and I've tried to be better about that because I think oftentimes I will switch to manual brakes too soon, and as a result, the differential brakes, as you probably saw there, you start to kind of teeter left or right because it's impossible to not. No matter how you do it, your feet, one leg is longer than the other. Like, it's genetics. So thus you automatically are applying asymmetric pressure. Mike's left leg is longer than his right or whatever. So you leave the auto brakes in basically almost, what, to 20, 30 knots-ish on the indicated?
I wouldn't say that much.
Okay.
On the average, let's say maybe, you probably come up on the manual brakings around probably about 70-ish or so knots
70,
in a
okay.
normal day. I think, one thing to point out with regard to what you just said, one of the things I was mentioning in that video is like in these situations where you're landing in like an adverse, condition. Let's say it's really heavy rain and it's just a really bad day. In that sort of situation, it's very advantageous to actually leave them on significantly longer and, let the plane automatically get you down to a creeping taxi speed almost, because it kind of ties back to everything you were just talking, Jason. It's spot on. The human just cannot apply exactly equal braking, and it introduces this kind of left and right, swaying. And on a windy day, on a slick runway, it's just like, you don't want to deal with that if you don't have to. So,
right.
Technique.
Warrior, thank you for the host. Poutine Flyer. Oh, man, you're going to make us all hungry. Poutine, thank you so much for that raid. I appreciate it very much. It is good to see you. Jonathan, always a pleasure, sir. Welcome aboard. Hope you're doing well. We have just landed at Missoula. We're with Mike. He's talking us through how to be better Airbus pilots. And I got to admit, ladies and gentlemen, that was a pretty good landing. We're having a great flight. Mike has been a true gem and asset to this experience tonight. Brian, it is good to see you, sir. So we've cleared the runway. We've disarmed or we've stowed our ground spoilers. My flaps coming all the way up right away. Any delay, leave it at flaps 1. What's kind of the SOP on that, Mike?
Yeah, great question. So when the captain actually triggers the FO, let's say, to start that after landing flow, and it's just like what you said. He'll reach down and he'll hit that the speed brake lever and disarm him, and then you just flow right across right away. And yeah, you'll bring the flaps all the way up. Most of the time, there is a little book exception under these like hot conditions. There's something about the Airbus that on a hot day, you'll leave them out. I think it's above 35 Celsius. You'll leave them at flaps 1. It's just like there's some parts in the interior portion of the wing that supposedly, you want to keep cool or something. So it's really small, like technical, like nerdy thing to tell you guys. But yeah, most of the time you just bring them all the way up and you'll finish cleaning up the plane. And it's, within, as soon as you exit the last like active runway, let's say, and things are kind of quiet, you're not task saturated with other things that you need to do.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that none of us are nerdy when it comes to flight sim. None of us care about that stuff. So that is very interesting. How about the brake fans? So I have hot brakes because I like to move it. When do you typically turn on your brake fans?
You can do them as soon as you clear the runway. There's not really like a book prescribed time, I guess. And I'm a fan of using them without them. It's funny at my carrier, like most of the fleet actually doesn't have them. So like when you actually get in one of the planes that does, you're like, oh, that's cool. It's an extra button we get to use. Like, why the heck not? Let's turn these things on. So
right.
It's just a neat little thing.
Okay. So we're at the gate, Mike. Our brake fans are running. Our ground spoilers are disarmed. Our APU is available. Let's pretend there's a jetway here. Do I turn the APU bleed on before the engines go off, or do I turn the engines off and then the APU bleed?
Usually we'll do the APU bleed after the engines come down. It's also a technique thing. The book actually talks about making this changeover while one of the engines is still running, but there's actually a something with the valves in there that you can actually get a little bit of like exhaust, fume smell kind of coming through the cabin. So most folks at my carrier anyways, I think most of the people who fly the plane just kind of know about this, like the technique thing. They'll just leave it to the main engine shut down. You don't have this business about the intermixing of some of that air in those valves to get that kind of smell in there.
Okay. Kithrick had a question about dispatch. Let's circle back on that. I know dispatch probably dictates this for the most part, but do you ever decide to step climb for fuel efficiency on the fly?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. When we get out there, you'll of course get updated winds as you step through the progression of the flight. So it might just be advantageous. The box will tell you, hey, you save some gas if you go up in altitude, and it's a discretionary thing at that point.
So yeah, just subjective to the real conditions when we actually get out there and we're flying, you know, as opposed to what the dispatcher was looking at, you know, a couple hours prior maybe.
Excellent. Cell 6, it's good to see you, dude. Cell 6, we're with Mike. We're going to do a little bit of a turn. Digi, yes. Same to you. Thank you so much, Digi. Appreciate the raid. Appreciate you stopping by. Flight, that's very interesting. It happens on the 170 as well because of the exhaust. Gotcha. Okay. We are going to turn around and head to Portland, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to take about 30 seconds here to pause for station identification, i.e. get SimBrief doing its thing. And we're going to hop on VATSIM for this one. So there's currently no controllers. I mean, what are the odds that Seattle Center is not online? Seattle Center is always online, but they are not online tonight. Maybe that is or isn't a bad thing. And we're looking good here. We're looking good there. Perfect. Alex, what's going on? How are you doing, Alex? It's good to see you. Alex is a friend and neighbor from the UK. He also is a bus driver. It's good to see you. Captain Tim, thank you so much for hanging out. Ooh, Fort Lauderdale, Atlanta, O'Hare in the 5-7. Have a great night, Tim. I appreciate you spending some time with us this evening. We will see you later, sir. Alex, I hope you're doing well. I got to ask, are you on your way to Berlin? Alex always seems to either be going to or from Berlin because, what is it? It's like 4 in the morning over there, Mike. So we are going MSO to PDX, Val. Let's go ahead and get that dialed up here. All right. So. Mike, are you still with me? Your video froze.
I'm here.
Okay.
It was a little choppy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Jason?
I think Zoom is being stupid. There we go.
Okay. Okay.
It is a glitch in the matrix, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I think the internet's just kind of being sassy here. I hear you, but you're breaking up, Mike.
Is it a little choppy?
Yeah, the video's choppy, but I think the audio is okay. Ethan, it's good to see you, dude. Thanks for stopping by. So, all right. Yeah, it has been a little while, Ethan. I figured you were busy with your coursework, so it's all good, dude. It is all good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this fired up. Oh, very nice. San Francisco to Honolulu. Woohoo! That's a big one. All right. Going up to 34. Let's see here. That's looking good. We'll leave brake fans on. I think everything's looking good here. Yeah, the video's being a little sassy, but that's... I'm not too worried about the video. Sometimes that thing just kind of takes a dive on me with Zoom.
Yeah.
All right, we are ASA1...
But you said the voice is still coming clear, Jason?
Yeah, the voice is okay, and it'll probably... I have found that sometimes it just falls out of sync and it just kind of fixes itself later on.
Sure.
15 340. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and do some ground performance information. So, all right, you have finished up this flight, Mike. Let's pretend we're IRL. You are not getting off the plane. Instead, you are now headed to Portland. What are some of the things that you're thinking about doing? What's sort of happening right
now? Just, you know, a couple things. Like, of course, you take care of your physiological needs. You know, you want to hit the restroom real quick, stretch out a little bit. Somebody's going to do another walk around, just the exterior, you know, check the aircraft again.
then you'll just, if you're on a quick turn, you'll just start jumping in, starting with the reprogramming everything, just like you're doing here. Not a lot of, I guess, surprise stuff. I mean, it's pretty much the exact same thing with a little bit of time compression in between, between the legs here. Yeah, in the real world, a lot of guys, like they'll call the wife, call the girlfriend, whatever, and just check in at home, for a couple minutes, and
sure,
check an email or something, and just kind of do some normal stuff. But we usually say you need about 30 solid minutes to really do like a real proper like setup and brief, and like everything needs to get done, before you take the plane out again. So any time up ahead of that, going to the terminal, grab a sandwich, or any number of things, just depending on where your day's at and what's going on.
Gotcha. Okay, let's go ahead and get some weights going here. Ethan, I start flight lessons again on Monday. Oh, you got a fever. No good, dude. Please, Ethan, take care of yourself, sir. Sometimes it's stress. Dude, the worst time of year for me with illness was at the end of an academic year, because I was so stressed with cramming for studying and taking exams. My anxiety was up. My adrenaline was up. That week after exams, I just completely vegged. Just like total shutdown, relax, get caught up on World of Warcraft, that sort of stuff. So please take care of yourself, dude, because it's kind of a vulnerable time of year for students. I, as someone who manages students at my job, I find that illness right around now spikes because they're just so exhausted and run down. Ah, Val, no good. No good on the crash. All right. So while that's going here, let's get this dialed up. Let's do A321. We're going to hop on VATSIM, dialed, set, loaded. We've got, so we have our init stuff. We've already done that. We didn't do our init B because we're trying to be better pilots. Now, speaking of being a better pilot, we have an interesting departure out of Missoula. Because there are a lot of big mountains and boulders and all sorts of craziness, we have a very interesting chicane of a departure. You can see that we're going to depart to the south. We're going to head south, Iplug. We're going to make a left. We're going to come back to the Missoula VOR, and then we're going to track out to the Mullen Pass VOR that we came in on. So we're not just going to fly and make a turn. This is kind of, this is like Palm Springs departure, where you kind of loop the field, you do a figure 8 to get your altitude up, and then, Marty, you accelerate up to 88 miles an hour and then depart. So that's what we're doing. Kithrick, do you reset the IRS on turnaround?
Good question. There's actually a tolerance that will check on the, I want to say it's on the data position monitor page, and you can see like how much drift has occurred in each system. Our books say if it's not more than 5 nautical miles of drift, you're okay to blast off with it again. But I'm one of those people that's kind of like a little bit OCD, so I always want everything like zeroed out. So I'll do a quick align, on a quick turn like this, and just get everything zeroed out more or less.
Okay. Let's go ahead. Let's pretend that company has sent us a flaps 2 departure. Let's go ahead and finally set this here, 70.5. We're at 28.2. And we're going to put 7.25-ish tons on board. Let's go over to perf, and we'll go 150. Now you can see here from our first flight, just talking about differences, when we left Seattle, we had a V1 speed of 160. This one is only 150 now, but our flex temp is way, way down. Our flex is only at 30. And I suspect that has, what Mike was talking about earlier, it's all of those performance factors. Weight, runway length, weather, winds, all that stuff. So that's what we're dealing with. For those of you that don't know, the higher the flex, the greater the D rate. The lower the flex, the more thrust. And you always want to make sure you have maybe a little too much versus not enough. I think that's probably a general rule of thumb here. Val has a question. Why do some A320s go with flaps 1 departure instead of flaps 2? Mike, if you want to give us a recap on that from our first leg, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. And you kind of already touched on it, Jason. I mean, it is strictly a performance thing. So it's just, the aero data that, processes our stuff, for example. I mean, they're looking at all these real world,
hey, Captain, let me know where you want this
the
thing.
length of the runway, the weight of the airplane. And they're like, hey, if you need a little more lift, to get off this runway, then you're going to go with the flaps 2. And, okay, you don't need it as much. Okay, flap 1 is fine.
Hey, Captain, let me know where you want this thing.
Yeah, just a situational thing, I guess you'd say.
Okay. Flight was saying initial climb is another consideration for flap setting, clearing obstacles, etc.
Sure.
Great news, Captain. Your toe's coming.
Or, the other one, we kind of talked about it before also, if you're taking off from a place like John Wayne or something, you got a really short runway, you can take advantage of the aerodynamic advantages that come along with a greater distance. It's just one more of those factors that is looked at, when the performance folks are chugging numbers for us.
We had a little bit of an audio choke there, but the quick synopsis for those of you that may not have heard what Mike said was there are a variety of factors, and one of them is going to be the aerodynamic properties as with regards
all
to
right, looks like the doors and hatches are closed and we're ready to connect.
Which is what Flight was referring to as well, that there is some consideration, Mike, it sounds like, once you're off the ground, the first 30 to 90 seconds probably also have a very high level of consideration, considering that is a very dangerous stage in terms of if you have a problem or should you run into an issue.
Absolutely.
So I have a quick question before we answer Kithrick's question. Speaking of, dangerous, and I use that term loosely or heavily, depending on how you want to look at it. When you think
Welcome aboard, Captain. Toes connected, bypass pins inserted.
When you think of
the parking brake when you're ready to go.
We'll wait for Kat to finish here. When you think of difficulty, not dangerous, difficulty, what is a more difficult phase of flight? The first 3 minutes after departure or the final 3 minutes before arrival?
I'd probably go with the arrival sort of scenario on that one. I just, in my mind, I mean, they're both very fragile states of the flight. Let's say, you're low to the ground, you don't have a lot of airspeed. I feel
Here
like
comes
in the
the
takeoff
pushback.
scenario,
Light them up.
Just the way that I look at it, I think you have a little bit more outs in a way, let's say, to just continue on and get away from the ground. But when you're coming down, on a landing in a, let's say an adverse, gusty, situation, it's just, to me, there's just a few more added elements that, are prone to, adding a little bit extra danger. And therefore it's just like, you just really have to apply some care and technique and some appropriate judgment, very quickly, in some cases, if you're in one of these situations.
And let's see here. Oh, Paddle out. What's going on, dude? You snuck in on me. Paddle, it's great to see you 7 months in a row with the resub. Thank you so much, Paddle. I really appreciate it, dude. It is great to see you. I hope all is well. I hope you've had a good week, and I hope things are good on your end. I appreciate you joining me. Paddle is an incredible and amazing supporter of Seatback Pocket and the stream, and it is great to have you with me, dude. It's funny, Darkwing Duck, it's funny that you mentioned that. My wife last week was dyeing some new yarn, and it's called Darkwing Duck, and it looks outstanding. I think when we make you a new ascot for 2021, Paddle, we'll have to do it in the Darkwing Duck yarn. Because you are, by far, my favorite ascot-wearing boat captain. Mike, the joke that I have with Paddle, he is a Twitch streamer as well, and a damn good one. But we don't know what he looks like because not all streamers use a face cam, which is perfectly fine. So I've imagined him as this tall, dark, handsome boat captain with the big corn cob pipe and like this billowing,
just about done here. Go ahead and set your parking brake.
Ascot, just like regal in his
and we're disconnecting
Captain Morgan
Give me just a moment.
And yeah. Because I always like to create these like fictitious profiles of like, I wonder what, is on the other end.
Yeah,
so
you've got a vivid imagination. I like it.
Yeah,
that's my style right there.
And ladies and gentlemen, we have Seattle Center online, so that's pretty exciting. All right, push is good. Let's get that APU off. We should have been better about that, so we're not sucking in the fumes. And let's go ahead and start thinking about our roll here. Ground is getting ready to disconnect, and I'm gonna adjust. I'm gonna give us a little bit more daylight here. Sometimes flying in the dark, meh. Sometimes flying in the dark, yay. But
and we're disconnected. Signal and pin on the right. Take it easy and have a safe flight.
All right, a little bit of stretch here. We've been sitting for 2 hours and 15 minutes. My doctor's probably saying stop, but it is what it is. All right, so let's do flaps 2. We're going to arm. We're going to do auto brake max. We're going to come down here and do flight controls. We've got down 2. We don't want up 1. We don't want up 3. Let's go the other way. That's down 2. Let's come over here. Trying to be good pilots based on what our good friend Mike has walked us through. Put this on transponder. We'll tilt this up. Ignition is stowed. We I think we've got everything 340. Taxi light coming on, and let's roll. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen that have arrived recently, we have our good friend Mike hanging out with us. He is a pro level bus driver on the esports team of his choice, and we are talking about how I can do better to fly the Airbus. So that's what we're doing this evening. If you have questions for Mike, please put them in the chat. If you have questions for me, well, I'm going to ask Mike, and we will go from there. So on our departure, we discussed very briefly here the Missoula 5 departure. We're going to pretend to be the Mercedes Formula 1 team as we chicane through here. Essentially, we're going to immediately turn right on a 189 heading. We're going to intercept the 159 radial. We're going to fly up to 7,800 feet. Then we're going to turn back and fly on the 339 heading to fly over the VOR, basically over the field, and then out to the northwest. It's kind of a funky departure. I don't know of many departures that are like this. The only one that I can think of off the top of my head is Palm Springs. But if anyone else in the chat can think of another kind of chicane-like departure where you circle back over the field before you leave the area, please feel free to share that airport with us. I'm genuinely curious. So, Mike, you've now made the turnaround and you're on your way back. What are some considerations that, let's say the first flight, you have a lot of turbulence, and you know that you're headed back the same direction.
Yeah.
But the weather is not a static element. Let's say company sends you pretty much back over an area where you're like, look, man, we just came from there at 35,000 feet. At 34,000 feet, we're probably going to have a bad time again. Do you have the ability to call up, or not call up, but, basically say you're going to need to move us south or have us higher or lower or what have you?
Yeah, of course. We've always got the option of calling into our dispatch folks. And I think they like it as much as we do. We get to talk to them. It's not an everyday thing, but certainly if there's some added consideration that we can throw into the mix and they can help us plan for, there's a great willingness to work together, of course, as you'd imagine. But gosh, I feel like at least in my care and everywhere else I work, these folks are so good, and they just, they do have some of the tools. They're just always looking at the charts and the graphics, and like, for the most part, they seem to be pretty on top of, just like you say, maybe you need to be routed around an area of thunderstorms or something on the way out now, and they're looking at all that stuff. And gosh, in general, we got a great group of folks that works for us. It's pretty cool to have that level of trust, I guess. They're just like, I didn't need to worry about this because these guys are on top of it.
Right. Zafunk asks, as a real life pilot, what conditions make you nervous, if any?
Yeah, I see Flight 52 hit a couple of ones that I was going to mention. I mean, the fire scenario. I mean, there's not a lot of outs that you have. When you're airborne and you got a burning airplane, that's a very time critical situation. Fuel is the other one that really bothers me. I mean, you only got a certain amount of fuel, and if you got to solve the problem in a given amount of time. So if you put yourself into a box, you can get into some pretty hazardous situations that can be scary. Flight control failures would be the other one that's, a very scary thing to think about. If you lose the ability to control your airplane, I mean, there's not a lot that you can do once you're up there airborne. So, I mean, thank God, I mean, these are all things that, we're at a point in aviation in general where the safety has progressed so much, and the redundancy and the way these airplanes are designed. I mean, thankfully, these situations are so rare now. But yeah, I guess like most things that happen in airplanes, like we can do something about them. But the things that we can't do anything about, that we have no control, the scariest things, of course, for obvious reasons. So.
Sure, and that makes sense. The good news is that as a non-pilot, some of those correspond very well with the things that we deal with, in our lives. The things that you can't control are the scariest, because you can't follow a checklist or a procedure. The manual says do this, and it's like, yeah, that's not working. You got anything else for me? Because yeah, I kind of can't hit that button, or that button is not doing what it should be doing right now. So that's obviously scary. Certainly most of what I deal with is when your hard drive doesn't work, or you got a problem with Zoom or whatever. Where Mike's at 34,000 feet trying to troubleshoot your voice over IP phone, it's a little different. All right. So we're going to line up. We have the Seattle Center online. We won't talk to him or her yet because we're not in their airspace. We're in Salt Lake Center. So let's go ahead and come upstairs. We're going to do our lights early. We'll get all those dialed up. Now, we still have some toasty wheels. 210 on the left, 260 on the right. I got my brake fans rolling, Mike. Can I take off?
Okay. You'd never take off with the brake fans on, but okay. Yeah, you're shown in the green there. This is one of those limitations. I want to say it's 300C, I think, is the limitation. So you're below those temps there. So I think you're good to go.
All right, so we'll turn the fans off. I'm sure we'll probably get a little bit of a spike in temp as a result of the fans going off. But we're going to roll out. We're going to make it work, and we're good to go. So again, ladies and gentlemen, we're doing kind of this weird chicane thing on departure, where we're going to kind of basically do a figure 8 in the sky south of the field, and then come back and over the field. 2. So actually, you know what we should have done, to Mike's point, we should have hard-coded that VOR, because that's going to be a very important component. The Missoula VOR, we're not only tracking an outbound radial, we then need to track an inbound course on the VOR to properly execute on this departure.
On runway 12.
Just leave the gear out. Well, exactly, Kithrick. I'm going to pop a window, cool it off a bit. All right. Stand them up 50%, let them settle. Thrust is looking mighty fine. That's our first click. That's our second click. Manflex 30, SRS runway, auto thrust is hanging out and waiting for a good time. As we roll out here, we're looking to make the turn on a 189 heading fairly quickly. That's 80 knots. Stick level 100 knots. V1 coming up. That's V1. We're looking good here. That's a rotate. Not too fast on that pitch so we don't scrape the butt. Coming all the way up. Positive rate gear coming up. All right, there's that 189 heading that it wants us to do. Start making that turn. All right, let's go ahead and pitch for some speed here. Got that trend coming up. Climb thrust coming in. All right, 189 heading now. Flaps 1. So, Mike, when you have kind of a more complicated departure like this, are there any extra considerations, rather than it just up and away, follow the SID? What are some of the things that you're really keeping an eye on?
I mean, with this one, it's just, you're of course just paying attention to the guidance, and you're already aware of the terrain that's around you. So you're just kind of watching to see how things shape up around you. There are some instances, like one that comes to my mind, Jason, is like when you leave San Jose, California, there's one, used to be called like the loop departure. I think it might be called something different. You kind of do the same thing. You do this big, like long loop, back over the field. And, there is an interesting one where you're actually below Class B airspace for a point in time. So you actually have to like maintain a slower speed than what you're normally used to in like a normal acceleration profile. So you're doing this really funny business of like, in some circumstances, you'll actually keep flap 1 in there till a much later point in time. And you're doing this kind of awkward, like, more steep climb, to try to get back up over the field, meet the altitude restriction when you come back over the VOR. So like in a situation like that, you're doing something that's very non-standard, and you're really hyper paying attention to just like the configuration, the speed, and everything that's like aerodynamically happening with the airplane, let's say. So that's kind of one, I think, where there's a little bit more elements present. But in your situation here, it's just like you're doing. You're just monitoring. The guidance is taking you where you want to go, and just kind of watching its thing. So not really here. I wouldn't say there's a lot of added things to take into account.
Now let's pretend that. So we are on our way outbound based on the expected SID. Is there a situation where ATC might give us a shortcut and say, we have cleared the terrain. You don't need to go all the way out this far. You can start heading back. Is that a thing?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. That's exactly what is happening. They see you're in the clear. Okay, he's in my minimum airspace here. Yeah, go direct. Get out of here.
Okay.
Get on your way. Expedite.
So let's go direct Orone here. Let's give ourselves a little bit of a shortcut. All right, that's 10,000. So we've got flaps up, gear up, ground spoilers disarmed. Let's go ahead and turn all these lights off. Looking good, looking good. And let's look out the window here. So while we're looking out the window here, looks like we had a question. Yeah, that's a legit thing. I had one of the wheel brake sensors on MEL one time, and the procedure was literally to leave the gear out for 4 minutes after takeoff. Just a straight 4 minutes. Wow. Now, in that situation where you're leaving the gear out for 4 minutes, you can't exceed the retraction speed then, right, flight? And at 4 minutes, you've climbed past, acceleration to 250, I would imagine. Oh man, we gonna get call out? We gonna get 2,500 call? No, we're good. Woo! When it gave me the shortcut and it immediately had me turn right, I said to myself, "Ooh, I probably should have started the left turn on a manual heading and then said direct. Because it's going to turn me to the right, and there's a big old wall right there of rock. But I could almost see it in Mike's face. He's like, he should have gone left and then done it. But
no, you're fine, man. That's what they told you to do. That's what they told you to do.
Yeah, you know. That's what French engineering gets you for this. So if they say we're safe, we're safe. All right, so we're on our way here. I had some questions prepared for Mike so that when I was chatting with him, it wasn't completely out of the blue here. So we've talked about airplane stuff, and airplane stuff is fun. Mike, you used to fly the 175. How long did you fly the 175?
Oh gosh, I was on the plane for about 3 years, I think, in total. It was about 2 years as a FO and a year as a captain on it.
What about that yoke, man? What?
Great question. I had the same thoughts going into it as you, like, what the heck is this? This can't possibly be like, comfortable or good or whatever. After spending some time in it, I loved it. Well, one criticism I have of it is that it's hard to tell just from looking at photos of it, but it's actually like a really big, like beefy, like chunk of like metal. So like it's hard, even like a grown adult man, like to get your whole hand around the entirety of the control device there. It's just like, it's kind of awkward. And at first you really feel like it's just like too big. So it's like, if I could go back to Embraer and say it just is great, except just make the whole form factor a little bit smaller, I think that would really be good. But after a while, one thing I got to tell you about it too that a lot of people don't think of is like you get to do this thing where you can actually like rest the tops of your like forearms on the top of the ram horns there, and you can actually kind of direct the plane around a little bit, like in this almost like semi-natural, like as if you're just controlling the wings on a bird or something. Like, so you can kind of fly it, in just a little bit slightly like different ergonomic way, which might sound really funny, but it's just one small observation that I had. But
ladies and gentlemen,
after a while,
Mike is talking about steering his car with his knees. That's exactly what you're just like, you're in stop and go traffic and you want to give your arms a break, and you're just rocking the steering wheel with your knees, man.
One other thing I got to tell you, Jason, you'll find interesting is everybody learned this one really fast, but the way that when you're sitting in the seat for both the pilots, your knees will actually at times, like, they're in the way of the yoke moving around. So you'll have the guy or girl, whoever is flying it, they're making like a violent correction, let's say in a really windy situation. They'll like whack your knee with the side of the yoke that's like coming down into you. So you learn really fast in those Embraer planes, like you keep your legs, you just learn to keep them inwards, like towards the center column of the thing. It's just, everybody just knows that after a while. So once again, another place where the Airbus shines with the stick there, like everything's out of the way, but like
right.
that dang Embraer thing, it was a little awkward. I won't lie.
Your favorite airport to fly in or out of, or both, if you want to give us both?
Gosh, I always enjoyed going into like the really big, like really busy places, and like for me, like flying into like JFK Airport, it just like symbolized like the center point of the union of like so many like international air carriers and operations, and there's just like so many cool planes like coming and going. It's such a busy place. There's just so much activity and like cool stuff happening around there, and just being in New York, it's just like, I don't know, it's still a gas to me, and like I get a little bit more of a rise out of those situations than I do like flying into like maybe the more like terrain challenging or procedural challenging type places. And that's just my little nerdy thing, I guess, like as a kid, just being like awed with like all this air traffic that comes from around the world and all converges in one place. Like I get such enjoyment factor in that for some reason.
How about John Wayne Airport?
Yeah, it's fun flying in down there. It's of course like a fun challenge to stick it on that short runway. It can get a little bit dicey. Like John Wayne is great like 95% of the time, but I tell you, sometimes you're down there and you get those like the Santa Ana winds like blowing through there. Man, it can be a little hairy, and you're just like, you're really kind of a little bit tense, like coming in under those pretenses on a short runway, just trying to make it look good, but fun overall. It's a challenge.
Nice. I've got a ping from ATC. I need to call him. I'm going to interrupt you for a sec here. Seattle Center, Alaska 1682, climbing through flight level 220 on the Missoula 5 departure.
Alaska 1682, Seattle Center, good evening, squawk 6664, 6664.
6664 for Alaska 1682.
Alaska 1682, thanks for your contact for 7 miles east of Mullen Pass, VR, climb and maintain flight level 340.
Climb and maintain flight level 340, Alaska 1682. Fresno J, what's going on, dude? So, Mike, just so you're aware, this is us right here. You can see that we're leaving Missoula. He contacted us a little early, although this drawing is not perfect. But basically, this guy, Jack, is doing kind of like what we're doing, where he's sitting in front of his computer, and he's looking at a scope. And he's directing traffic. You can see that we have Tower that has popped on, so he'll hand us off to Tower. And in this case, Seattle has an approach and a Tower. And we will talk to him pretty much the whole way. He will talk us through, and like normal ATC goes. So that is if
1682, turn left direct Pendleton VOR, much about Aviation.
Direct the Pendleton VOR for Alaska 1682. So I apologize if I'm going to step over you sometimes. It's not on purpose.
That's fine. That's totally fine.
Oh, no, Brian. No good. No good, Brian. So we talked about that you like JFK. I, the other day, flew into JFK. I flew the RNAV onto 13 left in the 321. It wasn't my finest hour. That turn onto final is gnarly. I didn't fly the visual, but that turn is surprisingly aggressive for a short final.
Yep.
I try very hard, as is the case with a lot of flight simmers, to pick kind of exotic arrivals, whether it's, circle to lands into Innsbruck, or the river visual into DCA, or, the 5 stacks visual into Burbank, because a lot of people, when they watch a stream, they kind of want to watch you sweat it out a little bit. They don't want to see you do, a ILS Autoland, with no wind. They want to see some crazy crosswind wreaking havoc down to minimums. You got ATC barking at you. I think we all agree, and even as someone who likes to watch other streamers, I want to watch you sweat, man. That's what I want to see.
They got to make sure you're earning your stripes, I guess.
Exactly. So Flight is saying that he was not a fan of LaGuardia, but he really enjoys Reagan.
Yeah. Those are two, both challenging places to go into. There's a lot of considerations with both those airports, and that's kind of the funny thing. And I don't know what it is. I mean, there's some days when like you go to work and you're just like, man, I'm ready for a challenge. Like I want to test my skills, and I want to, of course, maintain high level proficiency. But there's other days where you're just like, man, it's been a long day. Like I wish we didn't have to deal with this right now, because it's just like, gosh, it just. I don't want to worry about it. Give me the long 20-mile final, straight in kind of thing. I just want to take it easy today. So.
And unfortunately, I'm sure that because of what you do and how you do it, just because you want something, that doesn't mean you're going to get it.
Right.
Let's see what we got here. Oh, Jack heard about the Santa Ana winds. My American flight had the worst turbulence on descent in Orange County. Had a couple of times, but not that bad.
It gets gnarly out there for sure.
Flight saying inevitably the long days are the ones that you get diverted or held or whatever.
It's totally the Murphy's Law. I don't know what it is.
So, on the topic of 10-mile finals, and maybe we will get that, this is our arrival into Portland this evening, ladies and gentlemen. we are planning the hood arrival, the hood 4, excuse me, off of J.K. Knox. You see that this star is going to keep us a little bit more on our toes, mostly because we have altitude, we got a couple crossing restrictions, but we also have speed considerations. We can't just come bombing down the pipe and cross hood, at 12,000 feet and 300 indicated. So I'm gonna be tuning this kind of in the background while Mike is chatting with us. But Mike, when you have these speed restrictions and other crossing restrictions, let's say that my cost index doesn't align very well with a 270. I think the fastest I've ever seen on a star is 280. I don't know if I've ever seen faster than 280. But if I'm running a low cost index, I'm not moving at 280. I might only be moving at 270, 275. How does that work? Have you ever had that happen to you?
In the real world, a lot of the times we're actually just making a user entry. It's very standard on a lot of the most of the RNAV stars these days. It's always like your Mach number until you transition to 280 knots. You'll see that very commonly. There's other times though where if there isn't anything prescribed, time is not an issue or anything else. I'll usually go with a fast speed. I'll usually manually put in all right, let's transition to like 320 knots indicated or something. So you really, quite frankly, most of the time you kind of just forget about the box plan speed in the descent there, and you'll make some sort of entry depending on what the day is that you're working with there, whatever the situation is.
Okay. So one of the interesting parts, Sea Dog, what's going on, dude? It's so good to see you, man. I appreciate you stopping by. We have 3 letters to pick from this time, Mike. We have X, Y, and Z now.
Okay.
It looks like what we're planning on is a 2-8 left arrival. Based on the winds in Portland, winds are 300 at 7. Thus, it's telling us to plan on a 2-8 left. A 2-8 left will have us transition at Schaefer. So let us plan to do Schaefer on the Yankee, and you can see we do kind of a little dance here right as we get close to the field. It's not just a straight in. So we will need to be somewhat mindful of that as well. Flight, the only time I go 320 indicated is when I forget that I had to hit descend. And I'm just like, rut-row. So, okay, question for you, Mike.
Yep.
Occasionally, ATC is busy. It's a one-man show. Sometimes there are a lot of us flying. And there's always that one pilot, let's not be that pilot, right, where you're just not very good with the comms. You're distracted, you're streaming on Twitch, you're distracted with your chat because your chat's amazing. And you find yourself way too high, but with plenty of speed to burn, shall we call it. What I like to do is I'll go open descent, I'll leave it at like 0.78, and I'll go all the way up to 320, sometimes even 330. Am I doing it kind of right, or are you about to slap me on the wrist for that?
No, I think that's phenomenal technique. And a lot of folks, like when they're new to the airplane, they're so they want to go for the boards right away, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in general, I think most people are trying to be smooth. They're trying to just be aware of the people in the back and trying to fly this thing as efficiently as possible. And you absolutely are doing the right thing, I would argue, because hey, the people in the back don't know any difference between the plane going 300 knots or 330 knots, but by you using that to get yourself down, you don't have the boards up and shaking the wings there and shaking the cabin, and people that don't fly that often or wonder what the heck's going on maybe or something. So yeah, you got the speed there, use it, use the aerodynamics to your advantage. It's an efficient way to do it. That's I'd say that's kind of like the mastery level technique that folks that really get comfortable with the airplane really learn.
That was not for me. Sorry.
1302 Seattle Center radar contact. Climate hold 300.
Yeah, all I was going to say is that there's a learning curve to everything, and that's kind of like mastery level stuff. When people really get a feel for like what can this airplane do, and what can I get away with, and like what can I make this thing do for me. It's like that demonstrates like that higher level of understanding, and I think that's so cool that you've identified that, you realize that.
Just so we're clear, I actually learned that, for any of you watching, I learned that from a Flight Deck to Sim video on YouTube. Mike, so you're aware, Flight Deck to Sim is a Boeing pilot, I'm going to assume for Ryanair, but it's largely irrelevant, and he helped with consultation for the Zibo mod 737-800 for X-Plane, which is a phenomenal high-fidelity...
1302, turn left heading 180, when it will see our terms. J189, resume navigation.
Freeware version of the 737-800 for X-Plane.
Sorry, say again for 1302?
And I...
1302, turn left heading 180, when it will proceed our terms. Join J189 southbound, resume navigation.
And I had learned that from watching his video.
180, direct bound for the J1 for Southwest 1302.
All right. So hopefully we don't have battling audios, but we'll figure it out, ladies and gentlemen. How well does auto thrust work at the higher air speeds in a 320? I found that when within 10 knots of VNO, our auto throttle does not hold speed very precisely.
I feel like it does pretty good, and most of the time when you're up going that fast, I'd venture to say that you're more in like a descent sort of situation. So really the thrust is like most of the time going to be at idle, so it's really not modulating at all, and it's just the plane pitches for the speed that you're commanding, like in the case of an open descent. But yeah, there might be scenarios where you're driving the plane down, you're on maybe like a more gradual descent profile, and the engine's using that thrust to maintain a profile, let's say. The bus is pretty good most of the time, but I will say that you really have to watch it, and I've watched a couple people get really close to an overspeed. It's like it makes you really uncomfortable, because you're like, hey man, do something, intervene there, do something about this, like don't let it just bust into that barber pole there. But no, most of the time I think it does a pretty good job in the bus. It's not bad.
I can't say that I run into a lot of issues where I have an overspeed problem. I think the biggest issue that I have is on short final. If I am a little too high and I'm trying to correct, I'll dip below, then I'll shallow my descent, and then all of a sudden the auto thrust is like, oh, now you need me? And it's trying to say, 5 seconds ago you didn't need me, and now you need me at 80%, and you run into the speed. That to me is the tricky part. So a follow-up question to that on the topic of auto thrust, do you ever fly the aircraft without auto thrust?
Yeah, we do occasionally. Most of the time it's going to be in a situation where you're hand flying an approach and you're just choosing to just go straight manual, and it's a great thing to do. I try to do it once on a 4-day trip at least, just to keep myself honest and keep myself engaged and just feeling the airplane. But I will say, it's so nice, like once you get used to it, and it really does work beautifully on the bus. It's just such a good job. It's just so nice to like use that automation and just like lean on it a little bit, and it does a really smooth, good job at what it does. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I find myself actually not, going full manual like that often.
Gotcha. Okay. Flight is saying he sees people dance on the barber pole and it makes me nervous. Not only is overspeed unsafe, but these airplanes will tell you the second you have that overspeed. I just don't want to do a carpet dance.
Yep, absolutely. And that's definitely another thing that I'll say about professionalism. And you see all sorts of different ranges in the flight deck, and like, don't get me wrong, I mean, there's not, for the most part, 99.9% of people are not complete cowboys, but every once in a while, yeah, you'll fly with people that they want to push things a little bit further for whatever reason, and it's always like a CRM thing where just learning to tell somebody like nicely or in a constructive, productive way that like, hey, like, it's really need to ride on the barber pole like that, like why are we doing this, like you're kind of making me sweat here a little bit, man. You mind just give a little berth on the speed there? And like most people are like, oh sorry, yeah, it's fine. But you see all kinds of different techniques, people out there. It's interesting.
How well does the auto thrust work on single engine?
Really good. I mean, at least in the sim, thank God, knock on wood, I've never had to do it in the real world, but it does a great job. And it's just, once again too, I mean, you really like, they really, with all these types of airplanes in this sort of, category, let's say when you get to this point, it's like they really teach you to trust and like lean on that automation there. It's just such a tool that, like, in something like a single engine scenario, like anything that you can do to unload yourself in a situation such as this, it's just such an advantage. And and it really is a fine line too. There's another technique thing that I love talking about with people. I think a lot of like us pilot type A people that come out and fly, like they want to just be like, oh, I'm a flying god and I can do anything. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know that, but it's like the automation's there. Like, we're in a hazardous situation, use it. Like, you don't have anything to prove here. We're just trying to affect a safe outcome if we're in like a single engine kind of scenario. So it's like, it's been funny, especially like when I was a captain, I would watch people like try to like prove something, and I'm like, oh man, like we're just here to be as professional, as safe as we can absolutely possibly be, and right now using the automation is the safest thing we can do for ourselves. So it's just so many, endless amount of scenarios that we could come up with to demonstrate that point. But that's just my little thing, Jason.
Absolutely. Flight, it was good to see you, brother. I have actually, believe it or not, I've been flying the SSG 195 with a JetBlue VA. I've got 3 flights under my belt. I did have a question for you, and maybe we can talk about it later. The auto throttle, because I believe it's auto throttle on the 195, not auto thrust, does not behave as I expected on descent. What I don't know is that how it behaves IRL, or is that a SSG implementation within the limits of X-Plane? Kithrick, it was my pleasure. Yeah, it's been amazing having Mike with us. He's been a real champ with answering questions and doing a great job. 7 months, Moose. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Moose. It has been 7 months. That's crazy, dude. Thank you for the resub and the continued support. I appreciate it so much, dude. It has been an absolute pleasure being your friend and getting to know you. I know some other pilots may be able to add on to this, but on longer flights, what do you guys do during cruise? To what extent can you bring stuff into the cockpit? Books, newspapers, phones, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, certainly some of these longer flights, like, they can get a bit monotonous. I mean, if for the most part, a lot of the portion of the flight is spent conversating with one another. I mean, it's just just kind of like the natural thing that ends up happening. But you'll eat a meal, you'll drink a couple cups of coffee. There's like, I mean, gosh, like, there's regulations, and there's the company directed stuff that says, like, you're really not supposed to be doing certain things up there. And like, for the most part, I people they're adhering to those things for the most part. But I mean, yeah, I mean, you're gonna read something here or there to keep your brain engaged a little bit. Yeah, probably you might do a little bit of that, but for the most part, and I can speak for myself only. I've just gotten to the point where, like, I'm just so happy and content, like, just sitting there watching the country go by. It's kind of like my quiet time to think, on a long flight. And like, I have no problem like sitting there 5 hours and just kind of being calm and mellow and drinking my coffee and just kind of watching everything go down. And it's just like, time goes by, you'd be surprised. So.
Flight is saying we aren't allowed to use Wi-Fi or anything on our tablets. He reads a lot.
Yep. Yeah, that's correct. I mean, if you think about it, from a professional standpoint, I mean, we're not supposed to be up there distracting ourselves from the main task that we have at hand. That's just operating the flight and keeping everything safe. It's right there in the regs and in the company manuals and everything. So that's a mark of professionalism, let's say.
So on the topic of distractions, are you a sports fan, Mike?
A little bit, not a huge one, but I do watch a little bit of sport.
What is your jam?
Oh gosh, well I had been into the Warriors are pretty hot there, the basketball team there. I know you're a Sacramento kind of local guy, so I don't know if you know the Bay Area sports much, but they've been fun to watch. I grew up like a Red Sox and a Patriots fan. I know, like, everybody out here, they hate me for it, but that's my roots are on the East Coast there.
My parents are from Worcester, Mass.
Really?
Clinton, and mom's parents lived on the Cape in Centerville, just off Hyannis. They are diehard Patriots, Celtics, Red Sox fans. Growing up in New Jersey, obviously we got to see a lot of those teams because they play the Yankees, they play the Knicks and the Nets, and you got the Bruins when they're playing the Rangers and the Devils. Especially, it's hard not to watch the Patriots because oftentimes when they're doing well, they're the game of the week, they're Monday Night Football, they're Sunday Night Football. So even when they're out of market, you would get Patriots. But I am a Raiders fan.
Okay.
I'm very excited about the prospects of seeing Tom with his Bucks jersey in a couple of months in Las Vegas, but we'll see what happens. It's not looking good, but we'll see how it goes. In the chat, we've got some Chiefs, we've got some Niners, we've got some Jaguars, we've got some Lions. Everyone's kind of all over the place. One of the interesting things, and Mike, you can speak to this as a Massachusetts native, when you grow up in Massachusetts, you like all of the area teams. If you watch hockey, you're a Bruins fan. If you watch baseball, you're a Red Sox fan. You follow all of the sports, whether it's on Nesson or whatever. Like, you have to be a fan of all the teams.
Right. Yeah, you're obligated.
Yeah.
More or less,
Now, you don't have the accent. You don't.
No, so that's one thing, Jason. So my parents and my cousins, aunts and uncles and everything, they were, Massachusetts folks. My folks moved to California, where I'm at right now, right before I was born. So every summer and, holidays and stuff, we'd be on the East Coast there. And so I had the appreciation and the, all the experience and time back there. But I've been a California person my whole life. So I guess, no accent for me, but my mom still has one. Actually.
Welcome to Worcester. $1.25.
So, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the accent, but I am a big fan of saying depacha whenever I talk on the radios. It's one of the few words that it easily rolls off the tongue so well, but I don't have all the other hard, drawn-out R's, no magasia power pockets kata yad, stuff like that. So, but you can tell, Fresno J knows that every so often it pops into my head where certain words I will somehow channel my mother, which she also does not have the heavy accent. Neither of my parents do, which is kind of odd because they lived there for 40 some odd years. Jersey Shore, yeah, indeed with the Jersey Shore. It's always funny. Growing up on the East Coast, we didn't have the word hella. Hella is a California kind of NorCal thing, where on the East Coast, especially in the Massachusetts area, it's wicked. Wicked this, wicked that, wicked, wicked. So it was very interesting the first time when I moved to Sacramento, because it's been about 11 years, someone was like, oh man, that's hella fresh. It's like, hella like the lights you put on the top of your truck, hella? No, hella. Like, is that kind of like a West Coast Wicked? They're like, no, not the Broadway show. I was like, okay, the fact that you know that that's a Broadway. Anyways, moving on from that. But yeah.
I sympathize so much. It's so funny, a few of us East Coasters out here know these things, but hey.
There are certain words or slang terms or other dialogue where if someone says a word or a word a certain way, you immediately know where they're from. Flu Diddy, I see you lurking. It's kind of like Howard's mom, right, Flu Diddy? Howard's mom from Big Bang Theory. It's good to see you, Flu Diddy. Appreciate you stopping by. Hope you're doing well. Hope you've had a good week, sir. Drove us nuts, Valley nuts, because we thought it sounded dumb. Yeah, I don't hear hella very often anymore, but there were a couple people that I worked with when I first moved out here where honestly it was used regularly in a sentence with them, so it was just kind of funky.
I agree, it's faded a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and as with anything in life, sometimes things go away and then they come back. You know, what's old is new, or what have you. So, Mike, we have the ability to get the ATIS for VATSIM from kind of far away. So that's what I've done here for us, because we're landing where there's a tower controller. So, just so you're aware, we have information Juliet now on board. With those winds, we're looking at an ILS 28 left or 28 right. We have simultaneous approaches. Runway 3 and 21 is closed. So in the event that you hear something, that is what that is in regards to. The controllers, when they staff a position, will put an ATIS up for the high-profile fields. In this case, Seattle and Portland are probably the two biggest fields in the SeaTac area, or as far as their controlling airspace. Another question that I had, and it was just kind of unrelated. We had talked about reading with flight. Hold on. I turned X-Pilot down too low. Okay. Let me change that.
Delta 1495, radar contact 20 miles northwest of Baker City, BR.
Can you hear ATC, Mike?
I can hear him. Yeah.
Cool. So how about books, TV, movies? What's kind of your jam on that?
I'm glad you asked me. I was a huge Game of Thrones fan, believe it or not. I must have watched that show, like I rewatched it a couple times all the way through. I'm still a little bit mad about the way it ended, but it was a good run most of the way through there. Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, big fan. I'm trying to still find like a presently running show that I really be able to get super into. I haven't found anything I was super excited about in the recent. Have you, Jason? Anything that's caught your attention?
You know, my wife and I have been watching Ultimate Tag on Wednesday nights. The Watt brothers, of which apparently there are 3. I thought there was only 2. On Wednesday nights, they have a show on Fox where
1682, road landing west, descend via the hood for arrival. The Portland altimeter is 3002.
All right, we'll descend via the hood for arrival. Portland is at 3002 for Alaska 1682. So I've been watching that on Wednesday nights. My wife and I also like a lot of the European, especially UK television. So we've been watching The Great British Sewing Bee. I have found a way for us to get that. We did our honeymoon over in London, and we discovered our love of London, UK competitive game shows, because over there you have to actually have knowledge, talent, skill. Like they had math game shows, they had, other things that required more than just like how big your muscles were or how cute Becky is and stuff like that, right. Which is what we have a lot of over here. Not to dig on, the Big Brother type shows, but that's not really my jam. One of the shows, though, that I really liked, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, it was a little over-dramatized. It's on YouTube. EasyJet did a series. It was like In the Cockpit, and it's available on YouTube. I hopefully it's not available on YouTube where it's like legal to watch, but I've watched it. And it's basically like a 40-minute program that they did where they followed along EasyJet pilots from the cockpit. And it was very interesting to kind of see. It was basically a 40-minute program about your life, like what you do before you get there, what you do in the cockpit, what you do on the ground, and stuff like that. Some of it was like a little over the top, where it's like, and now the dangerous approach into Innsbruck. This could be life or death. I'm like, dude, ILS, perfect visibility. So, the announcer narrator definitely kind of overdid it a couple times.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting because I really like all of the random programming, not the Usual Suspects type stuff. Love the movie Usual Suspects, but yeah.
Well, I wanted to throw one thing in there, Jason. You made me think of, and that was like part of the impetus behind me wanting to make, just this little channel that I've made. Is I think a lot of the the content creators out there that are doing aviation. And this is not a knock to anybody, but there's a lot of channels that are just kind of glamorizing, the job or the whatever you want to say. They kind of show you some pretty flashy things, but I've always sought to just I want to teach you guys something, guys and girls, and I want to teach you what it's really like in the real world and try to show you a little bit more about this is what we're really doing here, kind of thing. And these are some real pilot stuff right here, rather than just dazzling you with visuals or whatever. So it's that's just been kind of my little angle on things, and hopefully some people are interested in that.
Yeah. Every pilot that I've spoken to, whether it's in the comments or via a messaging, they all certainly like different things or other things about the job, but kind of the general consensus is that there's a fair amount of personal sacrifice. There's financial sacrifice, there's personal sacrifice, you're away from home, time zones, your body clock. It's not exactly at times, and maybe more times than not, a glamorous job, to use a lack of a better term.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's another thing that I think, kind of gets glossed over. And, I don't know. I just think there's more value for folks that, just kind of tell them how it really is, and don't, a flashy video that makes something look really cool is great and all, but somebody really wants to know about doing this career or getting into it. It's been part of the angle that I've been trying to work with as well.
So 1 second, Woe Bunny, we will get to your question. I'm going to just call ATC and let him know. Seattle Center, Alaska 1682 is descending out of 340. Yes, big fan of Jeopardy. It's impossible not to love Jeopardy. I had the pleasure of watching the Ken Jennings run when it was on TV, not where he was crowned the greatest of all time a couple months ago, but his original 72 or 74 episode run. I vividly remember watching it almost every night with my dad over the summer. It was incredible to watch what was essentially a wizard. He had such mastery and command of the game, the way it was played, just everything about that. And it was fun. Jeopardy is such a great game because some nights I do well. Other nights, I don't think I get a single one right. And it's always a good feeling when a category comes up and you're like, oh yeah, this is it. This is my jam. And then you get them all right. You feel really good. And then you realize that you know nothing about 14th century art, installations, and that it turned out the Final Jeopardy, you're just like, who? What? What? So, yeah. Woe Bunny has asked, I have a question for Mike. Can I still be allowed to fly even if I have PTSD?
That's a good question. I honestly don't have a lot of insight on, the psychologist type of, approach to a question like that. I mean, there is psych evaluations, like when you go through interviews and try to get jobs, of course. So, there's some standard, but as far as the intricacies of those, I'm really not that educated. But one thing I really want to stress to people is that, there's folks that come from all different backgrounds and people that have overcame such tremendous things in their lives. So I'm always just trying to tell people, whatever you think, I know we're all dealing with things in life. I mean, hopefully these things are overcomable. I try to instill people that no matter what, you can overcome whatever those issues are that you think you might be working with, and you can achieve this, you can get here, there is a solution. Like I said, a lot of different people have really different stories that make their way into the flight decks, and you'd just be surprised what adversity people have overcame at some points in time. So I would just say with that issue, although I'm not an expert, I would just say don't give up. If it's a dream of yours that you really want to fly, and don't let that hold you back, let's say, from pursuing it.
Excellent. One of the things, and I don't know if I had told you this, Mike, on the email that I sent you kind of before we got started, that I would love to fly. But I have one expensive hobby that's dangerous, riding my bike, and you know that as a California resident. But I also don't want to go down the rabbit hole of expense, because I know that I'm the type of person where I'm going to go for that discovery flight out of Davis. I'm going to be in the 172 and be like, oh my God. Wait, hold on here. We are, so, oh, here you go. So VNav has gotten a little squirrely on us here. Do you ever have this happen IRL where it just all of a sudden dips and dives like 6,000 feet a minute?
Yeah, you'll see some funny stuff happen, and I'm still trying to like keep track of like what scenarios this seems to rear its head more than others, or honestly, like every once in a while, like one time out of 100, let's say, the plane will just do something like that. You're like, why the heck did it calculate this way? You're just like, some of the stuff, like you don't really know. You can't. There's no explanation. You're like, it shouldn't be doing this right now, but
right. Well, in this case, we needed to be above flight level 240 at JK Knox, and then we need to be above 17,000 at Mito with 27 nautical miles to run. So ballpark number 27 divided by 3, that's 9. So we got 9,000 feet to lose. So we have enough buffer. We only have 7,000 feet that we need to lose. So the good news is you're telling me that while I think this is funky, IRL this is not terribly uncommon.
Sometimes it happens. Yeah. Be surprised.
Good to know. Good to know. Yes, Force Master, love me some bike riding. I need to be better about it with the heat right now, but it's a work in progress. We're hoping to fix it real soon. So as we begin our arrival here, I think what happened, Mike, is it wanted to be at flight level 240 at JK instead of at or above. And that's why it got kind of aggressive there, because if you notice, now we pretty much hit that profile, and in reality we didn't need to do that. So let's verify right here. Let's go into Mito. I mean, it's certainly programmed to be 17 plus, but SimEdge 1 Tango Bravo, we'll see. We'll see. A part of me would like to do it just to kind of say that I've done it. However, I've promised myself that I will not start down the PPL route because I, A, probably won't be able to finish it, and B, know I can't afford it. So why bother starting the journey if you can't finish it? Maybe that's a defeatist attitude. Maybe it is. But as a 38-year-old guy with a beautiful wife and a career and a home, I just don't know if I want to go down a journey that I can't finish, or at least give myself the opportunity to finish. Because obviously, you don't just get the PPL by flying around for 50 hours and pointing out things and, making sure the stick moves good or whatever. You still have to, do stuff and know stuff. And I just don't know if I'm ready to commit to that. Aero, I saw the new Amonda came out today, and I saw they even have a new level of carbon. I saw that they've gone to an OCLV 8 carbon now. Be curious if that's made in the US or if they're still going out to Taiwan for it. I haven't done enough research, but yeah, the new Amonda looks very good. Price point's fair with the DI2 and the ETAP. It's still that 5,700 range, but meh. Mike, I don't know how big you are into bikes, but I'm kind of big into bikes if you haven't figured it out.
Saw them hanging in the back. I'm not super up on all that stuff, but I think it's cool. It's all heck,
Yeah, some of my viewers are also aware of the various bike stuff out there, and one of the very interesting things about bikes is they're very expensive if you're not careful. You can easily spend a lot of money on a bike. And oddly enough, with all the COVID-19 stuff,
Delta 27, 85, turn left direct.
Bikes are hot. Bikes are in, man. Bike shops are selling through their inventory. There was a bike that came out about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago from Specialized, and I reached out to my buddy who works at a bike shop, and they can't even get them till November. It's June. So it's definitely pretty wild. Yeah, it is. Bike shops are crushing expectations, which it's kind of interesting when you think about how it is, because you look at the airline industry and it's like, what? And then you look at bike shops and they're like,
they're killing it.
Yeah, they're just minting money. So it's really interesting how certain areas have flourished, while other areas have basically abandoned all ye who enter. And it's just interesting to see that. Certainly, I have a lot of sympathy for those negatively impacted. It's hard not to, but it is interesting to kind of see that dynamic unfold. My first discovery was an absolute calming and rare experience that most will never be able to appreciate, to say the least. Okay? All right. Sim Edge 1 Tango Bravo, you may ultimately convince me, sir. So, we are heading over to Bayer,
Seattle Center, November 214, Echo X-ray request.
which is 270 above 13, and then Hood.
Echo X-ray, Seattle Center. Seattle Center, November 214, Echo X-ray, 3,500 plus an IF flight to Portland. We're currently 5 to south of southbound.
How often do you find yourself in and out of the Portland area, Mike?
6633.
Quite a bit, Jason.
6633, November 214,
I want to say, gosh, in the last, let's say the first, since like April or so, maybe a year look back. I mean, it seemed like every trip, we started going through there quite a bit, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, gosh, once or twice every 4-day sequence kind of thing.
Gotcha.
For 214 Echo X-ray, radar contact 24 miles north of the story of you are. Are able to maintain your terrain obstacle clearance separation between.
Yeah, bikes. Just to kind of continue down the road. These are the new bikes that just came out, and here is where things get crazy, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. That says $12,000. And just so we're clear, there's no motor in this thing, ladies and gentlemen.
1682 kilos, current Portland, advise you of the weather. Expect the ILS route 28 right approach.
All right, we'll check for weather. We'll plan for the ILS 28 right approach for Alaska 1682. Shed with the raid. Good evening, Shed. Hello, hello. I hope you're doing well. You're a bus driver too, sir, right? Sim Edge 1 Tango Bravo, absolutely. Mike has been incredible tonight. It has exceeded all expectations, and I'm so glad to hear that you're enjoying it.
Glad everybody's enjoying it.
So, we now have to change our arrival. We're planning 28 right. We had planned 28 left and an RNAV, so we're going ILS 28 right. Would I still put my star here, even though we're inside the star, Mike?
In this situation, I'm trying to see how close in. No, you probably at this point, unless they're intending to have you fly some portion of that procedure, a lot of times they'll break you off on a vectors like a good ways out. And in that situation, of course, like you don't need any of these points in there, so you wouldn't bother programming any of that.
So I would go no star here.
Yeah.
Okay. And then my VIA is probably Schaefer still. Schaefer, yeah. Okay. So an ILS 28 right, which I'm going to bring up the chart on that. Shed, how was your stream? I saw you working real hard at, speaking of that, Boston Senna. We were just talking about Depacha and, Swampscott and all that other stuff. So hope you're doing well. Appreciate you coming by. I hope you had a great stream. So let's go ahead and 28 right. So no star approach via, we said, is going to be Schaefer. And let's go ahead and temporary that. So in this case, it wants us now to go direct to Schaefer, which will clear out all of the other waypoints, which will clear out Hood and Bell Run. Do you think that's going to be a problem? Because technically we haven't been vectored there yet.
Yeah. Well, in that case, you'd obviously want to leave those other points of navigation in there until they take you off. But
so let's see. This is one of the interesting things, and I'm glad we actually had this opportunity to see this, Mike. That I haven't quite figured out with the tow list, where it kind of blows out waypoints when you do a modification on the arrival. And I've come to the conclusion it's because I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, I'm trying to follow along, and if I've interpreted everything correctly so far, the controller just gave you a different runway to expect. Was that all he had changed on us, or?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So in this, I suppose that might, maybe I misinterpreted the question as we were talking through it a moment ago there. But in that case, you would do exactly as you did. Just change the runway. You don't have to modify any other stuff, and that'll leave your remaining points in there until you get down to the branch point and the procedure or wherever. That's going to direct you onto either runway or the other.
At Schaefer, cleared ILS running 28 right approach.
All right, at Schaefer, we're cleared for the ILS 28 right for Alaska 1682. Sorry, ILS 28 right approach.
There, Jason.
No. It's so one of the things that I have to do in the TOLUS, and you absolutely did not throw me off, is you have to reload the star, and then you have to reload all the transitions. You have to go into heading mode, and then because what's going to happen is when you reload the star, it takes you all the way back to the original transition point, which in this case is way the heck back there at JK Knox. So you go into heading mode, and then you go direct your next waypoint. Which it seems like a lot of work for single pilot. And I've been meaning to circle back with Gliding Kiwi, who's the developer of the TOLUS aircraft, because I think that I'm doing it wrong, but I'm also not entirely sure if I'm doing it wrong or it is not modeled to where you, IRL, from what you're used to programming, is different.
We can take it at Battleground for Echo.
So. Shed, I'm happy to hear that, dude. Chill stream, still alive, can't ask for more. That's all good, sir. Yeah, Flight. It is a little convoluted, and that's kind of what's funky for me, and oftentimes can get you into trouble, because it also then puts you into vertical speed on a heading, which, if you're not careful, that vertical speed might either be too aggressive or not aggressive enough. It's funny with bikes, I felt like mountain bikes and downhill bikes would be the most expensive with all the suspension, strong components. Oh, yeah, dude. Well, and once you go electronic Force Master, you automatically throw about $3,000 on it, which is just crazy, dude. Crazy. All right, so we're going down to 6,700. That's right. Not 7,000, not 6,500, 6,700 for Schaefer. Berserker, I think that's honestly an Airbus thing. I've had that happen in the TOLUS, the Flight Factor, and the FS Labs. Ah, interesting. Well, Berserker, A, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you sharing that. Hope you're doing amazing.
Expect the VOR Alpha approach. Set maintain 8,000. Set maintain 8,000 and we'll get Kilo for 4 FX, sir. Delta 1495, Kilo's current point advise you have it, expect the ILS range.
You're a little close to the ground, but not that close.
Expecting ILS 28 right, and we have Kilo, Delta 1495.
Berserker's saying, I think it's a thing if the star to approach transitions change, it'll restart your arrival because the routing on the star changes. Not sure if Mike can verify that.
All that I was going to say, guys, is in the real thing, the plane knows that you're at, let's say halfway down the entirety of the RNAV star procedure, and you can just go in there and just straight change like I was saying before, just the runway, and it'll leave everything in there, and all the guidance and everything, and automation and everything can just stay as it is. And the only thing that gets changed is like I said, down at the very bottom of the procedure, the branch point that might take you off to like runway A or runway B. Those are the only things that will change in there. So it's, I certainly see the issue you're describing there, and yeah, it's just in the real world, you don't really have to worry about that.
Gotcha. All right. So let's go ahead and continue down. We need to go down to 3,700. And we're going down at 210. So we're looking good here. Flight, it's funny that you say that, dude. I have been saving my pennies for an Unshoots small bore target rifle. Secretly. And yes, you can spend a whole lot of money if you go down that path, sir. Oh, big time. Actually, he's right. If the runway only changes, it wouldn't restart the arrival, at least on the FS Labs. I think the FS Labs does it to me because if I change the star transition, which makes sense. Gotcha. So, we're good at 210 because that's what brought us in on the initial approach fix. And we are going to be somewhat mindful. Now, one of the interesting things here is, if you notice there, when we were at level flight there, we had a slightly upward pitch attitude. Now we're descending, so our auto thrust, will calm itself and then we'll slide down. We do, however, want to be mindful, as I was explaining to Mike earlier, and he nodded very aggressively. The A321 is slippery. And if you're not careful, you will be high and fast. Mike, when you fly, are you little guy, medium guy, long guy?
I'm 6'1", and I'm kind of lanky,
Okay.
One of those types.
How about the Airbus? So seeing you're a tall guy, are you comfy in the cockpit?
Completely comfortable.
Nice.
And that's, one thing I love telling people about the bus there, and I think it surprises a lot of folks. I mean, you step up in a 7.3 cockpit, I mean, you guys probably know if you've been in one of those, it's actually tight, quite tight and quite cramped, not a knock at Boeing or anything like that. It's just an older design. But the Airbus, it's like, you got a lot of elbow room, and, a tall guy, a big guy, a small guy, girl, whatever. It's so comfortable. It's just like, there's so much room up there. It's amazing. It really, the interesting thing about the 320 is, like, I've been told that, like, I think the width of, like, when you sit up in the front of this airplane, it's like more or less the same as like the 330, which is of course a wide body. It's just like amazing that you can have that same feeling, cockpit dimension standpoint between the two, the narrow body and the wide body of the family there.
Gotcha.
10 down to 6,000 for exit.
All right, let me 123.77. All right, we're looking good here. I have us in open descent because I'm keeping an eye on our glide slope. We're a touch high on it.
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and do a flaps 2, and then we'll go back into managed here. Let's actually, you know what? Let's slide under the glide here, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, you know what? Let's do some vertical speed because we haven't done vertical speed yet. Let's go 1,000. Sometimes when you do open descent with flaps 2 on a...
1682 at OMC, contact Portland Tower 123.77.
All right, we'll contact tower at OMZ for Alaska 1682. And I'm going to go ahead and slow to 185 on speed here. Mike, when you fly the Airbus, what are you typically in more often than not? The 19, the 20, or the 21?
Most of the time, it's been the 20.
All right, let's go ahead and take control. We'll slow to 180. That's OMSI. Flip COM 1.
COM 1 set to 124.2.
All right, we're touch high. Let's get that sorted, gentlemen. Portland Tower, Alaska 1682, ILS 28 right.
Alaska 1682, Portland Tower, wind 2705, runway 28 right, clear to land.
28 right, clear to land, Alaska 1682. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have an excellent opportunity because we are high, but we're gonna get it sorted. Wish my airplane was voice activated. That's cool. Yeah, flight. This is plane command, and it is a very, very cool feature because what's nice is I can tell it to do radio. Because let's say, for example, IRL, Mike's flying. You know, I'm sitting right seat. I'm the one that's doing all the radio work. The person flying is also not typically doing all the comms. So that kind of allows you to simulate that, shall we say. Because otherwise, the other person would be in charge of that.
2000.
What do you think of the audio with VATSIM, Mike? Do you find that it's clearer or not as clear versus the real world audio?
Just as far as like the volume and clarity, or maybe the
clarity, yeah.
I think it's great. That's it sounds like the real thing to me. To be honest with you guys, it's crazy, but yeah, that's pretty darn close to the real world there.
Nice. I am not doing good on the localizer, so let's get that corrected. We are one whole dot to the left, so let's get that fixed. And let's get that straightened out so we're good to go here. Ish the Fish. Hello, good evening. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you're doing well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have corrected, as Mike told us earlier, we want to be stable at about 1,000. We're at 1,100. We are a touch low. We're good on speed. We're now a little right of the... Man, this localizer is slippery tonight. You would think that it was moving. It's not. I am, but, you know. All right. I think part of the reason it's throwing me is I'm so used to the Pappies on the left that I was trying to go to the right of them. I think that was my problem. I was so focused on, oh, put the Pappies on the left. Nope.
Approaching 28 right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get this fixed. I'm feeling pretty good about it. So, Mike, let's say IRL this was happening. You see me hunting for the localizer. Have we created a go-around situation for ourselves here?
No, I mean, from what I can see, you're within all the parameters. So you're less than a dot deviation, on the glide slope and the localizer there. You're within, plus 10 knots and -5 on the speed. Everything's configured. You're in good shape here. Sync rate's looking good. Yeah, okay. Spot on, man. It's looking great.
Gaming, thank you for the follow. And Ish the Fish, thank you for the follow. Good evening, gentlemen. My name's Jason. Appreciate you hanging out with me this evening. We're on super short final for Portland.
40, 30, 20, retard, 10, 5.
All right.
Nice.
Reversers. Let's keep that center line, gentlemen. Let's keep that center line. We're in the touchdown zone. And let's plan for... We're going to go all the way down to Tango. I probably could have taken Alpha 6 there. But, yeah. There's a good reason for including Pappy location in your briefing. Ah, all right, all right. Stayed up way too late, but might as well watch the landing. Brian, I very much appreciate it, too. It's great to have you on board. So, Mike, one of the interesting things about flight simmers is we get hung up on the landing rate calculator. I have it displayed because it's fun, but the fact of the matter is, as Flight is saying, it's all about center line and touchdown zone. You certainly don't want to biff it because that's going to be a bad time. But yeah.
So 1682, welcome to Portland, actually, left when able.
Left when able, we're on Tango for Alaska 1682.
Alaska 1682, where are you parking tonight?
God, that's such a great question. I'll go ahead and park at South Terminal on the Bravo 4 side area.
Alaska 1682, roger, taxi to the gate via Tango.
Taxi to the gate via Tango, Alaska 1682. Thanks for your help this evening.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, let's get that cleaned up. Blip, 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 blip. All right, and this, let's start that. I always appreciate you caring about centerline touchdown zone and breaking them out as opposed to just get touchdown vertical speed. Jeremy, good evening. You're up late, sir. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, guys, I think for me, the big thing that I've been working on is the float. And what I mean by the float in this case is I had gotten feedback from Scare Bus Driver. That's his Twitch handle. And Mike, I had learned that when I flare, I was keeping my nose up too long. Mm-hmm. I think what was happening is I was...
November 4th, VR Alpha approach.
I'm going to disconnect from VATSIM. We don't need to talk to him anymore. He's just going to talk over us. So one of the things that I struggled with as a sim pilot was, you want to set a reasonable pitch on the flare as not to slam it but not to float it. And then I was basically riding the nose wheel, almost floating it, as I let braking and reversers bring the nose down. And the feedback that I had gotten from him was, bad pilot, don't do that. Once the mains touch down, you want to get the nose down, not aggressively, but with a sense of urgency, for lack of a better term. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
Yeah, I'd say, for the most part, there's no need to do like the victory wheelie, all the way down the runway. And, typically the wisdom or the guidance is just, hey, mains on the ground, fly the nose wheel down to the runway in not a forceful, but, certainly like a positive, manner, so to speak, and not try to milk it too much, keeping it up. Just a technique thing. I mean, I think most people try to be smooth with that transition, like letting the nose come down nice and easy where you don't want to slam it onto the ground. You certainly can if you put too much, pressure on the stick, or you just, I guess maybe relax altogether on the back pressure there, it can come down pretty forcefully and it's not good. But,
Gotcha.
But yeah, you looked fine there, what you did.
Thank you. We are going to do a replay on this flight because this is going to be our second. Sorry, this is our final flight. We've run over time, but I was able to get a little extension this evening because we had Mike on board. So I'm very appreciative of that. Braking in reverse thrust and lack of elevator input can lead to a slamming nose gear. Question for Mike here. Oh, Jeremy, dude, I'm sorry to hear about that migraine. I appreciate you stopping by to say hello nonetheless, dude. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I'm very appreciative of all of your support. Taylor Mock has a question while we're rolling up here. Question for Mike. Within my flight simulator, it feels like when I hold short of the runway and brake, it looks like I slammed on the brakes. How are the brakes in real life, and how cautious do you have to be?
Yeah, great question. They're actually not that touchy in the Airbus anyways. And like most of the other planes I've flown to this point, I mean, you can put some deal of like positive pressure on them, and you can kind of feel like a slow, gradual, like rolling to a stop. So it's not like so sharp of an engagement or grabbing of the brake calipers there where it really rocks you forward and feels uncomfortable or looks violent or whatever. And certainly, a heavy airplane like that, it just, you got a lot of momentum, and you're gonna have a little more gradual of a rolling stop, let's say.
Gotcha. Paddle has said the toeless flare logic is also very nuanced. They've tweaked it a couple times as well. Yes, Paddle. One of the things, ladies and gentlemen, real quick before we look at the replay, I had gotten feedback from a gentleman who apparently flies this aircraft IRL, and I wanted to show you something. I have a response curve. Notice that I have no response on my pitch axis for the first about 2% of travel. So it is not, basically he has created this system where, Mike, the real world side stick is probably pneumatically driven with solenoids and various other things to create the fly-by-wire system. And as such, there's a little bit of a lag because you have to move that mass to engage the electronic process. So certainly the joysticks that we have as desktop simmers are very light, feather light touch. So I encourage all of you that fly the toeless to try it out and see what you think, because really what I've tried to create is the weight of the initial sort of pull of the side stick. Would you agree with that, Mike, that you don't have immediate snap action response the moment that even the slightest bit of force is applied?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. It was something I was curious about before I got in the thing. I expected it to be like a very touchy, twitchy, even like the way it's rigged and the firmness of it. But when you get in there, it's actually like a pretty, like, feels like a really strong spring sort of mechanism in there. So you do have to make this, bit more of a positive movement with your hand to affect, that amount of change. And I think because of that, like built in, let's say like that, I don't know if you want to call it like the firmness or like a little bit of extra mushiness. It just allows for, I think, like a little bit more smoother of a manipulation of the flight control surfaces and everything. It kind of turns into some smooth motions and smooth landings for you. Because yeah, if it was like completely twitchy, like a PC stick, I mean, gosh, it seemed like you'd be all over the place. And
right,
everything like you said about the response time and everything, just the way the electronics are working. I mean, it's it goes hand in hand with that, I guess.
All right, let us pick up with the short final here. And hold on here. I accidentally hid Mike on the camera. What just happened here? I just did something funky with Zoom. Bruh. You know what, Mike? I'm I'm going to hide your photo, but we will we will figure that out in a second.
That's all right. Yeah, that's no problem.
Katie, hello. So we're looking good here. We're center line. We're touchdown zone. Let's keep an eye on that main here. So you can see I'm still kind of floating it a bit. I would like to shorten this run by about a second. Because in this case, my nose gear is not down in the touchdown zone. Not that I think that matters because the mains are down. But Mike, to put it into perspective, I used to float it pretty aggressively. And I've tried to be better with that. Katie, thank you so much for stopping by. Yeah, it's super late. No, you're a proper pilot too. It was amazing having you do this. Where the heck are my Zoom camera controls here? 1 second here. Why is this being strange? No. Obstinance, thank you so much. That's such an appropriate thing. Hold on. Zoom. I don't know how to bring it back. Camera control. Damn it. Taylor Mock, thank you so much for that follow. Yeah, it's totally just hidden itself here. What is going on right now? Mike, I don't know if I'm going to be able to bring you back, dude.
Okay.
What did I do? I have completely foobarred this. I think it's because it's late and we've been at this for like 3 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, while I try to figure this out off camera, let me bring up a link for Mike's channel. So his face is currently not on my screen, and I'm very sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I went to click something and I broke Zoom. But the gentleman that we had on this evening, Mike, is a Airbus pilot who creates a phenomenal YouTube series called What Do All These Buttons Do? And that is this stunningly handsome gentleman who I think needs to look into some Superman cosplay on the weekend. I mean, this is some serious Clark Kent action.
I was actually Superman this past Halloween.
Oh!
Yeah.
There you go.
I love it.
So if you have a chance, ladies and gentlemen, please give him a view, give him a subscribe. Really great content. I'm not going to lie. A not insignificant percentage of what I've learned as far as the content that I share on stream with you all, I've learned from his channel. So please drop him a note. He has been a true champion and been on with me for almost 4 hours tonight. Mike, it was an absolute pleasure having you with me. Is there anything that you would... Oh, there it is, show video. Is there anything, Mike, you have the comm that you would like to close us out with?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again, Jason. This was a tremendous honor, to be here and just to get a little more exposure. And I mean, as if you can't tell, I just love talking airplanes. So it's cool to be able to talk to people like yourself that are enthusiastic, and certainly for anybody out there that's watching. I mean, I'm just a normal, everyday kind of person that likes airplanes as much as you all do. So feel free to engage me on the channel, ask questions. I mean, that's what makes the whole thing fun for me. And, I kind of part of my angle, you'll see, I think, Jason's picked up on this. I mean, for anybody out there that's interested in, doing this as a career, I'm also very interested in trying to motivate and assist people just finding their way, and just teaching you whatever I can, or passing on whatever I can and trying to motivate you. So, and also too, I want to, I gotta throw it in there. Like, I appreciate what you're saying about my videos, but like some of the earlier stuff, I really I have a hard time watching myself, because I just really didn't have like my style and format, and even like my speech patterns and stuff. It's a little frustrating to watch. Some of those first segments were a little choppy. So I apologize to folks out there. I know some of them were kind of hard to watch, but I think it's come a long way, and it's just been fun, this whole project, and I really enjoyed doing it. So thanks for tuning in, and if for all you guys that have already. So
excellent. Mike, thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to rattle off all the names because it was a lot of you. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for all the new follows. Thank you for all the new subs. I'm Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 to 10. I pretty much just fly the Airbus. I'm hoping to do more of this with more Airbus pilots, whether it's Mike and Katie again or different people or new people. I've reached out to V1 Simulations. I'm hoping to do some stuff with him in the future. But just a quick round of applause for Mike. Mike, thank you so much again.
Thank you,
it
Jason.
Was a pleasure.
Yeah, you were a great host, and you're doing a great job flying that thing. I can't believe, just somebody doesn't have like real world training. It's like so much. So it's really cool to see that.
Thank you. Iowa Scotsman, have a good night. Ladies and gentlemen, have an outstanding night, a wonderful weekend, and as always, enjoy flight simulation. It is a great community. It is a wonderful tool, and let's find someone to raid, and then we'll finish up here. Have an outstanding weekend and a wonderful rest of your night. We haven't given B-Dub a raid in a while, so let's go ahead and do that. SimEdge 1 Tango Bravo. See you later, brother. Have a great night, sir. And we will see you later. Nope, I don't want to watch party. I want to raid someone. Come on. Just do it.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. I'm gonna play out.